Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 71. I am your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Don?
I'm going pretty well, pretty well. We got a lot of stuff to cover this week. You know, we've got our main review is Stranger Things Season 3, as well as Spiderman Far From Home, a pretty much in-depth spoiler review, along with some other things where we're going to talk about some news about Saw, a franchise that keeps on, coming back from the dead, even though like Jigsaw kind of does, because that's the whole point of the thing, and some anime as well. But yeah, let's just throw it off to breaking news, I suppose. Is that the Mortal Kombat movie, which is actually shooting in Australia, South Australia to be exact, they basically cast someone. They basically cast the main actor of the Raid movies, which I love. I love the Raid. You've watched the Raid, correct? I'm assuming you have.
I haven't watched The Raid. I've
Oh
I've
my
only
god.
watched it. Yeah, yeah. You should know this, but
I should know
because
this.
I always mention the movie that was inspired by um The Raid, which is the Judge Dredd movie that came out a few years ago. By the way, a fantastic film. Would recommend, but it's essentially like a very similar plot. At least the first one. I'm not too sure about the subsequent.
Do you mean the
But
Raid?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, no, yeah,
Uh,
no, I think the first one's very tight, really good. It basically put Gareth Edwards on the maps. It's not Gareth, it's another director, sorry, but he
mhm.
basically, he's up there. Raid Two is just more of the same, just extreme amounts, and I feel like with Raid Two, people didn't like it as much because it's just like there's just so much instead of a tight movie where it's like an hour and 45 pure action. The second
Mhm.
one's like 2 hours and 10 minutes, and it's like a lot.
Right.
It's a lot. It's very much like I even had the same thing where with what is it, John Wick 3.
Mhm.
When I saw it with my friend, he's just like, man, they're just like, it's good, but man, there's just so much action. You get really tired after a while, just watching it all.
Yeah, and I mean, with this new movie that's coming out for Mortal Kombat, like it definitely would fill a potential niche that's kind of missing from, I guess, mainstream Hollywood movies, which are like these kung fu movies or this like fighting movie. I guess we kind of have that with John Wick at the moment. That's kind of filling that particular like vacuum that people are kind of, but it kind of feels like a like multiple roles. Like it's like a fighting um genre, but it's got like action, which is
It's
also
got it,
kind of
yeah,
also
and it's got some comedy as
Fast and
well.
Furious. Yeah, like Fast and Furious technically also fills that role because we kind of don't have those like big action movie spectacles anymore. But this is where Kombat can come in, but then fill the niche of it being a martial arts movie.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely, and that's the thing. It's like casting people in the raid has actually been, I think, it's kind of been a meme because I remember seeing an article when what is it, The Force Awakens was like coming out and prepping. They were just like, yeah, J.J. Abrams get the raid actors in a scene, and they're in the like pretty much one of the worst scenes in The Force Awakens, which
oh,
is the
okay.
the Conjure Club scene in that the guy who's like
Yep.
talking to
Hmm.
Harrison Ford, and there was that random alien. It's just like such a waste of talent. Like I think that was there just because they're just like, if you're casting the raid guys, therefore meaning
Well,
there'd have to be some cool hand to hand combat going on, but there wasn't any.
yeah. Well, The Force Awakens wasn't that good, so again, my hot take, but I mean, I think universally, like everybody can retroactively look back and say that it's not that great of a film. Anyways, to move on, um, yeah, with if it isn't, I guess people from the raid, it's usually Donnie Yen, right? Like he's usually the guy that they get to
It's like Ip
kind of,
Man, that guy. It's like the two or
yeah,
three
hey,
like Asian guys who can do martial
hey, he's
arts.
he's he's one of the few guys who isn't Jackie Chan or Jet Li. It can't be those dudes anymore. Those guys are old. We have to get somebody that's slightly younger. But the thing is, like, yeah, so they have, I think the main actor from The Raid playing Sub Zero, which is super cool. And Warner Brothers did announce that the new Mortal Kombat movie is slated to come out for March 5th, 2021. So it's still a while away, but with James Wan producing, that's pretty good. Like, that it's in. good hands.
It's gonna
But
get
yeah,
some good goal going on, and special effects are gonna be pretty cool. I'm assuming that I feel like it's gonna have a particular style. I don't know who's directing it. I don't know if it is James Wan directing it, but
it's Simon McCoy. I'm not familiar with this particular director.
me
Um,
neither. But either way, I hope it's a good soul film, because like I think it also has the video game curse type of thing going on as well with it. Um, but I feel like
uh,
very
wait,
much more. I
wait,
think
wait.
yeah.
What video game, Kurt?
Well, the whole
Like
thing is
the
like, yeah, what video game movies never seem to
Oh
work out
yeah, they
well.
never seem to be good. Yeah. That I can definitely see.
Well, that's the thing.
I think
I
the
feel
big
like I think it's achievable. You just have to make it. I don't know,
have you
because
have
that's the thing. It like I've seen it many times before in the Mortal Kombat games, and they do a relatively good job with some of the storylines. Like I like it if it was just like a band of misfits is coming together, and they have to like not even just get rid of the tournament side of things and do some other stuff, because like, you know, you get someone like Johnny Cage who's like an actor, or like you get a martial arts actor being like, I know what I'm doing, and like play him like Chris Pratt play him or something. It'd be like a good parody on that. And like, you know,
well,
you've got the warring between Sub-Zero and Scorpion, which is pretty much the main feud. A lot of things happening, so I feel like there's a lot of interarching stories and cool characters that can work well together. I think it's just having a good overarching story and good actors
yeah,
to play
something
them.
like something cohesive. I mean, the thing is, I don't remember if it's like the first Mortal Kombat movie or the second Mortal Kombat movie, like live action. Like one of those was really good. Like for the time, obviously, probably it hasn't aged well, but I remember watching it and thinking, oh, that's a sick film. But then like the sequel came, like the not sequel, but rather like another version of the movie came out, and that was like hot trash. It definitely does have that potential to be that way, but I mean, Warner Brothers kind of does a really good job at the interpretation of certain like you know, I guess franchises, I guess, especially when you have something like NetherRealm currently doing their iteration for Mortal Kombat. They've released 3 games at the moment. Mortal Kombat, I want to say 9, 10, and 11.
Yeah, it was the reboot, which was just, I think, just called Mortal Kombat. Then it was like, yeah, 9, and then 10, and then
X,
yeah,
and then
and then
yeah,
just 11
11.
just came out. And I think the stories do service pretty well. Even like what Nether Realms does with Injustice. Like I did like the whole story. I know that's semi based off the comic book. Like even something like Injustice 2, where it's like Superman is in like prison, and Brainiac's coming, and everyone's like, yeah, we can't release Superman, but like Superman's like, yeah, you're all gonna die if you don't release me. So what are you gonna do? Like
Yeah,
I do like those stories, and I think they can do it if they can translate really well into if the screen, if they just have the right person behind the I guess the scenes.
I think one of the things that you also kind of pointed out is that in Mortal Kombat has like a very very large roster of um characters that they can put into a film. So this could put they if they're smart, they could turn the like as much as I don't like the concept of, oh, we're gonna make a movie for sequel potential, right? It's like this. We're only gonna make it if it's gonna have like a Mortal Kombat 2, 3, and 4 or whatever. But Mortal Kombat in particular is a film series that has the potential to do that. And again, it does have like a colorful cast of different people. If you want to kind of get like you can have like a diverse cast as well. You can have like, you have like Jax. I love playing Jax. Like dude's fucking dope with his metal arm. You have Liu Kang. As you mentioned, Johnny Cage. There's heaps of people that you can play, men and women, and I think that's the thing that can kind of get a bit difficult as well. Like having, checking all the boxes of who can be in a movie. You can do that with Mortal Kombat. I think, and it's like a very equal opportunist because like everybody dies. It'd be really cool to see some live action fatalities and see how they look like. So yeah, Mortal Kombat 2021. I mean, we've got a while to go before we see where that's going. But speaking of another kind of franchise that is kind of coming in the future, might be a while away, not too sure. Is the Game of Thrones prequel. So more details have come out about it. Apparently, one of the first things is that apparently Westeros is divided into 100 or like about 100 kingdoms, right? So it's not like it's not very united like how it is
There's no
in the
seven
series that
kingdoms.
we're.
It's 100 kingdoms now.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of makes sense. Like it's going to be like a far more like kind of I want to say maybe primitive, not primitive, but it's like a less united front that the series is going to deal with. But again, is that going to be interesting? Are we gonna go back and forth? Like the thing is that there is like another thing is that the Starks are going to be there, but the Lannisters won't be. So it's kind of like maybe we're going to see like the development of these characters in these houses as as they grow over time. Um, Another thing is apparently, yeah. So according to this article on EW, HBO's past breakdown appears to suggest that the show might be led by a trio of female leads. So again, that's a definitely a very bold move to kind of have the leads, be an all female lead. Especially
That's
for
a risky move, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, especially if it's gonna have the backing of George, which I'm pretty sure it does. So that's also really interesting because again, a lot of the information that this EW article is about comes directly from George R. Martin. So again, if he's kind of has a bit of a backing for it, like might have some potential. Maybe that's why we haven't got like the next book as of yet.
it still pisses me off because that's the main story. But yeah, like I know it is a little bit worrisome in a way because like the last time there was like a like type of leads like that, it was just the Dawn story arc in like season like 5, 6 of Game of Thrones, and I think
Mhm.
everyone critically did not like those. Like that was the lowest episode of Game of Thrones before the last season, obviously. Like
Mhm.
everyone did not like those characters, and like hopefully they just have better characters or they just introduce something because obviously it's a prequel. It could be my only theory.
Mhm.
This would be, and it could retcon a lot of different stuff. Is that if it's the Children of the Forest, because they're
Mhm.
mostly I think they're female or like the basically the people who created the White Walkers, um,
Yeah.
and it's like and they're
Mhm.
all female, so maybe it's some weird fantasy way like that. But I have no idea. That's my very open interpretation of how things could happen. But who
I, don't- I,
knows?
don't- I don't know. I don't think the Children of the Forest are really going to have that big of a role. I think they do mention in the article that the White Walkers will be in it, but they aren't referred to as White Walkers. So they're more like kind of proto. So I don't know. I don't know if that's definitely a big like a
Sounds like
big
Prometheus
out
to
there.
me. Like it's an alien thing, but don't call it alien because
Oh yeah, or like Walking Dead and them calling them walkers, right? Instead of uh, zombies.
Well,
Like
I think that's actually a meme. It's zombie movies never say the word zombie.
it's
Um,
so dumb. I
but
kind of actually
up until
really.
like only recently though, because like even stuff like Shaun of the Dead and a few other things like they're just like they never say zombie. I think that was I think the running joke. I think so. I don't know where it came from.
I don't.
Someone coined zombie along the way.
I mean, I think it's definitely a case where they're not doing it as a meme. Like maybe Shaun of the Dead was, but every other show is doing it purely so they can kind of have it be like, ooh, like when you say walkers, you'll think Walking Dead. It's definitely a marketing tactic in the way that they're doing it. But yeah, again, I think very much like what you said, like the last season of Game of Thrones left a very sour taste in people's mouths. And whether or not this show is going to get them excited about it again, I'm gonna say I'm gonna have a hot take and say no, just because I don't think the brand name is strong enough, especially given how they finished it to get people interested. Maybe it will have its hardcore people who are like, oh, I want to know everything about Game of Thrones. They'll watch it, but I don't think it's going to get the numbers. And maybe they know that, and they'll construct the show centered around that with like a lower budget, more simpler things that are happening, and hopefully a roadmap. The roadmap for the series is better made. But yeah, I guess it's something that we'll just have to see going forward. Um, but you know what? I'm looking at some of these news that I have. A lot of them are for things that are coming up, and one of them is if you've heard of it, Neon Genesis Evangelion is an anime series that is actually currently on Netflix, although uh, they did not get the license for I think the songs
The songs,
or
and I think they've recast everyone. I think
yeah, for the
that
voice
that
acting. It's
and
really
even the
weird,
girl
isn't
who
it?
was playing Asuka, like for all her years, and she's like the biggest fan of that character. She had to
Yeah.
audition again, and she didn't even get the part. So it's like I don't know. They must. I haven't watched the redub, but very interesting. I suppose.
Yeah, it's really weird. Especially because I think they also cut out certain scenes with certain characters. I won't spoil it for people, but Neon Genesis Evangelion is one of my favorite animes of all time. It's a deconstruction of the kind of mecha pilot genre, but it's also like a good anime in and of itself. And it's very revolutionary for the kind of work that was coming out for its time. So definitely, if you haven't watched the series, watch the Netflix version of it, even though it won't have a Japanese woman singing "Fly Me to the Moon" at the end for its ending. But it's a really good series. But as of recent, they were doing what's known as the Rebuild series, which is kind of like a semi-reboot, semi-retelling, semi-continuation. Again, it's kind of hard to explain without spoiling, but it basically is very simply like a reboot. And they've announced the fourth and final movie is coming out in 2020, which is a big deal. Just because people have been waiting for the fourth film, to come out. It's called Evangelion 3+1. Again, it's all very, it's all very Japanese and very eccentric in the way that they've named a lot of these
It's
things. But
basically
yeah,
they hired the person who named stuff from Square Enix. Yeah,
yeah,
man, Kingdom Hearts 365 over 2 days because that makes sense.
yeah. Hideki Anno, he's the director of the series. He's very eccentric in that way. But he makes really good stuff. I'm looking forward to more of this. When I went to Japan, I got a bunch of Evangelion kind of like models to make. I still haven't gotten around to make them, but I might have to now. And especially this kind of motivates me to go back and watch the series, especially if it's coming out in 2020. So that's also something I just want to throw out there because I'm a really, really big fan
Yeah, I
of
think
this
that's what is
particular
that your
series.
favorite anime? Yeah,
Yeah. It's like one of my favorite animes of all time. Yeah,
one of your.
so
Well,
highly
yeah,
recommend.
I think the industry really likes it. I feel like and fans because like it's very much a deconstruction of the mecha anime genre, which is I think in the 90s was very prevalent, and I think Evangelion came around, and it was kind of like it was basically the first deconstruction and subverting expectations thing that kind of
The
came out.
anime, yeah.
So before it was a ongoing joke. It was wowing
Well,
people at the time.
it did something interesting with its subversion, right? Like, we talk about how we don't like certain things being subverted, like the latest Star Wars films. We mention it all the time here. What's new? But like, at least with Evangelion, it kind of had something there to explain why certain things existed. And it's kind of like in a adult way, and you kind of like follow the journey of the pilots as they do it. But another thing that got announced is Akira, the very, very famous graphic novel and movie, is actually getting an anime series as well. So that's also really interesting. That a bunch of stuff like, kind of coming back into the limelight. We have, I think it's a Taika Waititi who's directing the Akira live action film. I think that's the case. Don't know if that'll
No,
be any
that
good.
yeah, I don't know if that's gonna happen because like been in development hell for so long. I think like DiCaprio wanted to star in it and direct it at one point, like 2011, 2012. I very like that's the thing. I was very against a live action version of it, but I think after seeing Alita, I'm like, you could do it at least into two parts. My whole thing is you need someone behind the helm of knowing exactly what to do. That's why you need someone like a Cameron who did Alita Battle Angel. I feel like could do a good job of like what your focus of the movie is, I guess, because Akira is very very big plot. Even the animated movie has like a small segment of what it's the manga had.
Yeah. It's definitely a very condensed version of the events that actually happen in the movie, which to be honest makes a lot of sense. Like, when you're trying to do something, when you're trying to cram so much into a movie, it's definitely can be quite hard to get the entire scope of what a body of work is. But I kind of look forward to it. Hopefully, it's not like a Netflix adaptation, right? Like because Netflix, sometimes they don't do their anime adaptations well. Although I do like Violet Evergarden. That is very good. I'm waiting for the season 2 to come out.
I heard Devilman Crybaby is pretty good as well. As well as
I've heard
Castlevania as well.
Yeah, I recently watched Castlevania, but I think I want to leave that for our anime episode, which I guess we'll have to do very soon, maybe next week, since a lot of shows are wrapping up and some of the new season shows are coming out. But speaking of Netflix adaptations, apparently Cuphead is getting its own kind of animation coming out, cartoon on Netflix, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I know you've completed the game, and I think they're actually coming out with a new DLC for the
Yeah,
game.
they come out with new DLC. I think there was recent news that they had to delay it up until next year, which is fine.
Mhm.
It is DLC, but it's on the Switch. Apparently, it's being put
Totally.
into Tesla cards as well. Like, it's
Yeah,
very
yeah, that's
interesting. I
really
feel
cool.
like everyone loves this franchise, even though it's not even a franchise yet. It's just one game, and I think everyone just loves it. And I love it. The art style is amazing. The game itself is very hard, but rewarding once you learn a lot of the things. And I'm just really happy that Cuphead is surviving in different mediums. I pretty much nearly collect. I'm trying my best to collect every single Cuphead memorabilia type of thing because I just love the characters and how they look, and the feel of everything about Cuphead. And yeah, I'm just really excited that they're having an animated show. My whole thing is I'm just hoping that it has a really good sense of style. I'm not expecting it to be like that 20s 30s type of animation, but I'm hoping the art style stays intact in that type of way. So it's kind of like a Felix the Cat, Betty Boop, where all these things are very abstract and weird. And I don't know, I just want the character designs to stay in that realm.
Well,
Obviously
I
they'll
mean,
have modern ways
I
to do
think
it, but yeah.
I think it will be just generally because I don't think that art style is going to change. It's kind of ingrained within the actual game, let alone anything. I don't think that's going to change. Also, on top of the reason why I don't think that's going to change, the Cuphead co-creator had said that they want to stay far away from computer-assisted animation. And for people who don't know, the style of Cuphead, like you said, it's like Betty Boop, like the old kind of like Steamboat Mickey kind of artwork, but I think all of it was hand drawn, right?
Yes, and I think that's
Uh,
why it took so long to get the game complete, because everything was hand drawn, then put into compute, like they scanned it each individual one. So that's why I get a feeling that this show is definitely not going to be 100% like obviously hand drawn, but like or it will take away some of the fidelity of the animation by skipping a few frames. There's gonna be
yeah,
something to give, because unless they get a studio that has a lot of people working on it at the exact same time, it'd be pretty expensive. So that's why I got a
but
feeling they're going to do
you
something
see,
different about it.
the thing is though, like I can definitely see, if the co-creators has that kind of attitude, that's the kind of attitude that you want for a game, or let alone for a cartoon, right? Um, it's very clear that he has like an idea for what the show can be and what it should be, and if it's going to come to Netflix, it has to be like this. So it probably they can probably take their time a little bit with it. We'll just see whether or not it's something that's superficially related, or whether it's like its own kind of adventure, where is it kind of a retelling of the game in some capacity? Is it like a sequel to the game? Who knows? Or maybe it's like a bridge to a Cuphead 2 that might come out.
Yeah, because the
There's
first
a
the
lot of
basically
potential.
the story of Cuphead is just, it's very simple. It's just these poor innocent Cuphead and Mugman, they gamble away their savings, and they don't have money to pay, which to the devil basically. So they're just kind of like, okay, you can be the devil's debt collectors. So the boss battles are basically taking their debt, aka their souls, to the devil. And that's just basically just you trying to get out of debt. That's the story. So I don't know if they're gonna do that as a story or something else, because I feel like I don't know, for what the world that they built, I feel like anything could happen because of the world and the animation style. So who knows? They could go on crazy hijink adventures, and I'd watch it. You know.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, to speak about like another particular interesting announcement. Apparently, Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson um, are gonna be starring in the new Saw movie. So it's just a bunch of information that just kind of like hit me all at once, and I was like, whoa, whoa, wait, what? I'm not too surprised Samuel L. Jackson is in it, just because like he is in a lot of film. The man works hard for the money. But to have also Chris Rock be in a Saw movie, it's like, and Saw, when was the last, like, is this like the 2000s again? Like,
Well,
where
there was
are we
that
talking
random
about?
there was a movie called Jigsaw that came out like 2 or 3
Yeah,
years ago, but like it's
yeah.
just
Well,
so,
that
and
was
that even then that was kind of like really divorced from the main series of Saw movies, which last one probably came out in like 2011 or something like that.
yeah. I mean, I think that the Saw series kind of, I feel like I watched like up to maybe Saw 3, um, and like a lot of them can kind of like they kind of bleed into each other. I think the only really iconic one, in my opinion, is Saw 1, just because of how simple of a plot is and the big like kind of quote unquote twist ending at the end, right? Like that's kind of like what captures people when you think about that film. Every other subsequent film is kind of like, oh, let's put multiple people in these weird situations, and oh, hey, look, you could have escaped without killing this person. It's all these kind of morally
Yeah, they're putting the
pesky.
morality inside a horror film, so it's not just schlocky people dying. Which is, yeah, it's interesting. They're probably, yeah, they basically just took the premise of like Seven almost, where it's like the seven deadly sins, and it's like basically punishing people who kind of deserve it in a way. Very interestingly is that the director of this movie is he's Darren Lynn Bousman. Obviously that name doesn't ring a bell to pretty much nearly everyone, but I looked up his IMDb, and he directed Repo the Genetic Opera, which is a cult classic horror musical, which I really do like. It does have some unique things, like a grave robber stealing essence of people's human lives, because it's a dystopian world where basically a Reaper man will come and take out your organs if you don't pay in time. It is very interesting. He has a very unique style. And basically, even with Reaper the Genetic Opera, you can see in the posters it says from the producers of Saw. So he basically has already worked with the people who've produced Saw. So it's kind of, I think it's Blumhouse Productions or something like that. It's one of them. So he's kind of in the same wheelhouse, and he basically just kind of gets to go to finally direct a Saw film aside of just working with just the producers. So I feel like he kind of knows what he's probably doing. And yeah, I'm just hoping maybe it does something very interesting, because you got someone like Chris Rock producing it, and you've got Samuel L. Jackson in the movie, which I'm assuming is either he's going to be like the new Jigsaw, or he's going to be like there's going to be some sort of detective storyline, and he's basically the detective trying to solve the case almost before time's up. I feel like I do not see him getting tortured and getting killed, basically.
Well, I mean, yeah, he definitely does seem like the type that is going to be, the cop or the older grizzled gentleman. I don't think he'd be Saw. I don't think this is a reboot, right? Isn't the actual identity of the Saw killer like a white dude? Why would it be Samuel L. Jackson?
Yeah, but
All of
but
a
that's the thing.
sudden.
But that's the thing. He's that doesn't really spoil anything. But it's been a long time. He's dead, quote unquote dead.
Yeah,
But like I don't know. Maybe it is a reboot, because like
I don't think it's
every horror every horror movie franchise has basically had a reboot at this point. So like I wouldn't be surprised if it's
but
separate.
most of them are kind of like a reboot semi continuation. It's usually like that. Even Halloween that recently came out. That's not a complete reboot. It's like, oh, we're gonna ignore Halloween 3 and onwards, and it's a continuation from Halloween 2. Like that's essentially like what the latest Halloween was. Like it's kind of what they're kind of doing with Terminator as well, right? Like Terminator, I think it's called Dark Fate or
Yes,
whatever
Dark
the new
Fate.
one is.
Yeah.
Um, that one's like, oh, we're ignoring Terminator 3 and onwards because those movies aren't that great.
They were pretty
Although I
bad.
actually, although I unironically found the last one very entertaining because of how ridiculous it is. I forget what that one was called, but
Genesis, like Genesis, I
Genesis.
feel like Genesis was just a bunch of fun. Like I honestly I didn't expect much of it, and it's just like it just very it is what it is. Like because that's the thing.
Mhm,
I think people hold Terminator to pretty high standards. Well, at least the first two films,
mhm.
because of just technology as well as someone like James Cameron, talking about like more methodical things about like can you be friends with an android that was originally set to kill you type of thing. But obviously they've kind of dropped the whole like what does it mean to be human and salvation and everything like that. But now it's just more of a action movie now. But who knows with
Yeah,
this new one.
I think the issue is that they generally have like a really bad. They've done a really bad job at keeping a movie that like has a very interesting plot, and they just kind of recycle things. Like again, it's always about Sarah Connor, and it's always about John Connor. Like I get it, but at one stage, like you have to move on from maybe that kind of stuff if you want to keep the movie interesting. Otherwise, you're going to keep falling into the same plot hole. But the other problem is you're always going to have people comparing it to number two, right? Because they have John Connor, they have Sarah Connor. Sarah Connor, one of the most iconic, female action heroes, right? Aside from, I'd say Ripley from the Alien series.
Mm.
These kind of characters. If you're going to have somebody come in, I don't know who it was. It? I don't want to say it's Emilia Clarke. I think it might have been some other actress
No, it
who
was
plays
Amelia
Sarah
Clarke
Connor.
in Genesis.
Was it? It
It,
was
it
Emilia
it's
Clarke.
actually
It
really
wasn't my
it's actually
imagination.
legit actually really funny is that two Game of Thrones stars were in Terminator franchise here. Amelia Clarke, it was like Sarah Connor,
Yeah.
and what is it? Lena Headey, who was Cersei. She was I forgot her name, but she was in the show, the Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Sarah Connor Chronicles was actually a dope show. Just putting it like low key, because I actually really liked. I only remember her from what is it? Say Firefly, right?
Oh yeah, that
Um,
girl.
yeah, she's kind of a little bit of from the shows that I've seen her in. She's usually very one dimensional. Like she's very much like oh, like kind of oh. Well, she plays a robot in Sarah Connor Chronicles,
Go figure.
and then her character is like this really like quiet, introverted, eccentric, psychic super soldier in Firefly, right? Although you only really get to see her be a badass in Serenity for the most part. But yeah, I think you know, we got went on a really big
So,
detour with
anyways,
this.
Firefly. When's that coming back, Disney? You got Fox. You
Well,
got you got
there is
Fox now. So
actually they do actually have like the comic series. I think that's kind of doing. You know how they talk about a big ass war that happens in Firefly.
yeah, that
Um,
war. Yep.
yeah, it's like the Chinese. I want to say American. I don't want to say American, like Federate War or whatever. That they were in. There's currently like a comic series that is like based around that particular like time period and what had happened between like the captain and that stage. But to kind of bring it back around to Saw, yeah, I think like yeah, they probably will do a reboot, but I think it's technically going to be a continuation. Maybe it'll be like copycat killer, or oh, it's the dead guy's son's uncle's son. Like it'll be something ridiculous like.
Yeah, it'll be like semi-related, but like I think so long as they I don't know, they could do something very interesting with this whole franchise that didn't exist before. So
We'll have
basically,
to
who
see.
knows? Yeah, who knows? Like, especially with the casting. But speaking of casting, we've got some basically Marvel news, which next week's San Diego Comic Con, they're probably waiting for the official announcements, but it basically is official at this point. Is that we've got casting for Marvel's The Eternals movie. And basically, they're casting Millie Bobby Brown from obviously Stranger Things to be in the movie, along with Angelina Jolie, which I don't know if that's still a rumor or not, or official, but basically we know that Millie Bobby Brown's going to be in a Marvel film, which is it's kind of good to see her kind of branching out. She was in Godzilla, and she's basically in this movie. So yeah, I don't know much about the Eternals, so I have no idea what she's gonna play or who she's
Yeah,
playing.
I can't say who she's playing either. I'm not as I've mentioned before, like outside of like maybe Spider-Man, and maybe the odd kind of Marvel character here and there. Like I don't read much Marvel comics. But again, it kind of the Eternals. It's space superheroes doing space things. It's kind of to me it kind of seems like the least interesting movie, but they kind of uh, reignited an interest in these like C-list, D-list superheroes with something like Guardians of the Galaxy. So if they kind of manage to get people interested with a good cast, especially if they're going to have a big character like, a big actress like Angelina Jolie in it, I can definitely see them kind of doing a good job. There's also rumors of Keanu Reeves potentially being in this series, and Selma Hayek as well. I haven't seen her in anything as of recent. But yeah, also as you mentioned, like Millie Bobby Brown, she's kind of popping up a little bit everywhere. She's kind of the more, uh, I guess, famous in out of the kids at least in from a mainstream appeal. Like people know her character. Oh, so she has a pretty iconic name. I think
Yeah, it's
when
the
people.
Millie Bobby Brown. I think Bobby Brown really sells it. Um, but yeah, like it's basically her and yeah, the main
Hopper.
well, Hopper, and like if you're talking about the kids, it's the
Oh, the
other
kids,
the
yeah.
girl, the guy who actually falls in love with 11, because
Oh, okay.
he was in the It movie, the recent It movie.
Oh, right. Yeah, and number two's coming out
Yeah,
really
soon. So like yeah, I think like
part one.
yeah, well yeah, those two seem to have the more or less appeal. I don't know if yeah, who knows what's going behind the scenes with the actors and their contracts basically. Um, but yeah, very interesting casting. Obviously I think we're gonna get an official announcement. Obviously this Saturday. At San Diego Comic Con, because they're gonna bring out the trailers, they're gonna bring out all the casting, because they, as mentioned before, they haven't really officially said that they're making the Black Widow movie, but it's been already leaked. Same with Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Black Panther 2, Doctor Strange 2, that martial arts one, whatever it was,
Oh yeah, like I don't know. I
whatever it
don't
was,
want
like Shang-Chi or something
to.
like that. It's like they have all these movies that we know are coming out. They just haven't officially said them, because what they always used to do before is like go to Comic Con and be like, this is Phase 4, and they just have all the movies there, exact dates of when they're coming out, and they're just like, cool, bye.
Yeah,
So
like their timeline. Yeah.
yeah, and since Endgame came out, which is officially pretty much the end of an era and a closing of the book of the MCU in a particular way, I feel like this is going to be their maybe possibly their Avengers 2012 2011 thing, what they did at San Diego Comic Con, which is very iconic, is when they had everyone like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth, and everyone basically on the same stage together, saying this is going to be the MCU. So maybe you're going to do that for like whatever this new phase is. But who knows?
Well, I don't know. I'm not. Time and time again, as things come out, I haven't been interested with these potential new movies. But again, we're going to be reviewing Spider-Man very soon, and that movie is good. But we'll have to see where things go, uh, you know, moving forward. But I guess we can go and do our first review for Stranger Things season 3. I saw this uh, pretty much straight away, and I watched it. I went back and watched our review for Stranger Things season 2 just to give myself like a bit of a refresher of like my thoughts about it. Because thinking back on Stranger Things season 2, when I was watching Stranger Things season 3, I kind of felt that this season was far more it was far more tight. It was better written, and everything kind of flowed better. And I think partially, when I went back and looked at our review, I think partially with season 2, you kind of had Hopper and Elle kind of disappear for. Sorry, not Hopper, but Elle in particular. She kind of runs away, and they kind of had that moment where like, oh, is this going to become like an X-Men franchise at one stage? And then she kind of comes back and saves the day. It kind of disrupted it, and it was a bit of a talking point for a lot of people
Well,
where they
let's
were
be
like,
honest here. I think they just got rid of it because no one liked it.
well, yeah, because it was bad, and no, do this show is a horror. Like I had somebody, I had a friend who, uh, they wanted to watch Stranger Things season 3, but they just started it from episode 1 of Stranger Things season 1, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I forgot how scary this this series is because it's very very horror centric. But obviously it's definitely lightened up, but I don't necessarily mind because there is still that horror focus in it. There is just a bigger focus on like I guess 80s nostalgia and ooh, how good was the 80s. But yeah, what was your thoughts for season 3?
Basically exactly what you just echoed right there. Like, season 2, I didn't know like as much. It was a
Hmm.
very, it felt very different. I feel like it's always obviously the Duffer Brothers being like, what can we do with this franchise? And I think maybe they were trying to do something and steer it into a different direction. But I feel like some people are just like, actually, I don't really like this. And I feel like they basically listened to fan feedback almost, where anything that didn't work well from the second season they just got rid of, and what anything worked before they gave us more of, which basically is what you want, especially with writers and directors these days don't really do that. I feel like basically the Duffer Brothers kind of delivered on that. Like as mentioned before, they got rid of the other experimental teen kids that might come back at some point, or else it's just a loose plot hole, but who knows. You've got that. You've got more of basically Dustin and Steve, which is basically the whole. Basically, this whole season is just them two together. I think people like that a lot in the second season and stuff like that.
Season 2, yeah.
So basically, they're just like, fine, we'll just give you more of that. And basically, they kind of did a really solid job, especially in this season. I felt like they kind of kept the mystery, as well as they kind of kept the horror. As mentioned before, I was like, because I was watching this, and the person I was watching it with, it's like, this is not really a kids thing. I'm like, no, it's not a kids thing at all. Like, it has kids in it, but it's very much not for kids at all.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it would definitely be rated, M for mature, right?
Mm.
I think the thing that they did, even looking back, I was like, what was the big threat in season 2? The big scary things were like discount demagogue and dog, like demodogs or whatever they called it, right? It was like, you know, one of the kids they found the frog, right? And they were, well, what they thought was a frog, um, and it slowly grew and became like this demodog thing that ate one of the dogs, and then it became a problem as the series progressed. But there wasn't really like something as big of a deal as it was with this season, where they kind of had 3 villains in a sense, right?
Mm.
So just to kind of explain the plot of the season 3, which by the way there will be spoilers for this, so if you haven't watched it, you definitely should. I think the stats that came out for the show basically said that it reached a new record. I think it was like about 40 million people watched this, and 80 million of them finished the entire series. I think by the weekend.
Mm.
So
Which
that's
is
that's
absolutely
crazy.
insane.
Yeah. Well, think about it. You had like 50% of your population that watched this franchise. Watched it over 2 days. They just binged the shit out of it. So it just goes to show that binging TV series is still a thing, which I kind of find really crazy when we live in a world that still does like these drip feed episode lists. Like people want things now. That's the kind, especially with these like 10 episode series. I remember I said the same. I think about Teen Titans, right? That came out. Oh, sorry, not Titan. Teen Titans, Titans, or whatever they called it.
It's Teen Titans, but yeah,
It's
Titans.
Teen
Yeah.
Titans. Oh
No,
yeah,
it's just called Titans, but it's Teen Titans, so whatever. It doesn't really matter.
well, I'm so used to calling Teen Titans because of the comics and stuff. But yeah, like it's like that show should have came out in the 10 episodes, just because a lot of the buzz about the TV series like got a lot of negative backlash because people were like, "Hey, this doesn't look like Starfire," and "Hey, this doesn't look like whatever." Like, if they had released everything, people could have viewed everything a body of work rather than episode by episode. But although I get the kind of justification because you do get like that hit in the media every time like an episode comes out. Because especially with like Stranger Things, like I totally forgot that the last season came out in 2017. So sometimes these shows, like if you're not kind of up to date with what's happening, like it'll come out and you won't even notice, and it's like, oh shit, like I need to go back and watch it. Not for Stranger Things though, as I mentioned, 40 million people watch this show.
It pretty much is their tentpole. Like I think that's really where everyone was like, not this is the time to get Netflix almost, because because at the time they did have something like House of Cards pretty much in the same year as well, around there. But I think like Stranger Things was very much the mainstream, broad and appeal TV show, and I think that's why there's a lot of things riding high on it. And then season 2 was a little bit of a letdown, but season 3 definitely a return to form, and I could I just can't wait to see what's going forward. But basically, the plot of this one is that it's I don't know the exact timeline, but basically we're a little bit more forward.
1985.
1985. Yeah, what a solid year.
Okay, actually, I want to actually just do the summary for this season because it's kind of related to something that I predicted. I guess almost 2 years ago.
Oh God.
Yeah. So anyway, so the basis of the again, spoilers, guys. So the basis of this season is set in 1985. I think it's like maybe 6 months or so since the last season, which kind of got me because I actually made a pretty big prediction about what this season was going to be about. But essentially, like a new mall had opened up. It's called Starcourt Mall, and it's kind of led to like all of the businesses going out of out of business in the local area, and it's also focused around like Mike and Eleven, they're dating, and like they're kind of, it's like a little bit of like a coming of age story. Again, that's kind of like what all these things kind of channel, like the 80s kind of stuff. Joyce and Hopper are trying to figure out why all the magnets aren't sticking on a fridge. You also have like Nancy, and I think Mike's brother. I keep forgetting his.
The guy who does drugs in real life. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy who always looks like he's on drugs because he was.
Go figure.
I think Jonathan. Nancy and John go on a bit of a mystery hunt about like strange things that are happening around town, and you also have the gang kind of hanging out after like Dustin comes back from like camp, and trying to figure out like what to do for the rest of the summer and trying to hang out as friends. But this also kind of delves into like a greater mystery because one of the things that I predicted is that it was going to have something to do with Russia. I predicted this, I guess, back in 2017. Although I had said that maybe it would have something to do with Chernobyl, since Chernobyl happened in the big explosion happened in 1986. And I thought that maybe they were going to do like a 1 year time skip, which is what they did for season 1. From season 1 to season 2 was a 1 year time skip. But they only did 6 months. It was still set in 1985. So there's still potential for that being the case, given the events of Stranger Things season 3. That maybe Chernobyl might be something that comes back. But I did mention that it's going to be something related with Russia, and it was something that I just kind of we kind of brainstormed then and there like 2 years ago, which is kind of crazy to think that I kind of came pretty close to it.
Because evil Russians, all right.
Well, I mean, I think I even said it back then. Like, it's very politically relevant in America, at least, because they had like all the supposed election hacking. Although I think as of now they said that there wasn't any potential collusion with Trump at the moment. So that's the thing. But it doesn't change the fact that kind of having like Russians be the bad guy was like a really big, a really typical thing that happened in the 80s and 90s. Before we replaced them with like, I guess, like Middle Eastern terrorists, they were always Russian. You know, if you kind of look back at like Die Hard, for example. Um, and the other thing, you know, like they do a lot of homages to old kind of 80s films, which they did in the past as well. But like, for example, like one of the main Russian dudes like is basically one for one almost look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Like in certain scenes, like, you know, they had him like wear like the leather jacket and they had like the black
Yeah,
like
yeah, there
tinted
was
glasses.
semi-receding hairline with the spiky hair and the jawline, and even the way he spoke. Even like I know he's Austrian, but man, I was just they're very much invoking that like unstoppable
Yeah,
killing machine.
and they actually like it's one of those things that is like, you know, when when they had Arnold Schwarzenegger like in a film, it would be like Arnold Schwarzenegger playing an American, but he sounds like German. It's, just ignore that. Whereas like, you know, in this it kind of makes sense why this guy spoke Russian, because there was literally a underground Russian facility, you know, in Starcourt, which was like the big reveal. But I guess we can talk about like kind of the, I guess, A, B, C, and D plot lines. We can talk about we can go with the what I think is a D plot, which is Nancy and Jonathan's kind of excavation and investigation. So they both recently, I think, started working at a newspaper, and I guess Nancy's trying to like prove herself, you know, as being a journalist, which, you know, which is what she was doing last season, which was trying to investigate the death of Barb. Ugh, Barb. No one cares about Barb.
I really, you know, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I really did think that they were going to bring her back
Oh my
when they showed
god.
the Upside Down again. I'm like, oh, they're going to do it, aren't they? But no, they didn't. I feel like the time has come and it's not going to happen. So yeah, Bob is basically gone.
I think at the end of season two, they basically quote unquote get justice for Barb, by getting the I guess the U.S. government to admit that yes, like her disappearance was related to the experiments that they were doing at the facility that was now closed. But the thing is, like, you know, it's kind of like a continuation of you know, Nancy wanting to be you know, a journalist. But you see, my issue is like, you know, and so one of the things that they do is, you know, she works at like a newspaper office, and everybody's obviously like a blatant asshole to her, like, you know, kind of ringing true to like the, I guess, the toxic work culture that existed in the 80s, especially towards women, you know, with all the sexism and stuff. But the thing is, like, every time I watched it, it was just like this really ham-fisted version of what like office sexism would have been like. Like, I don't know if you felt like that.
Like
Like, it's like
it is very cartoony. I think, but that's the thing.
I think
I
like
feel like it was kind of done in that type of way. Like they got what's his name? They got the I forgot
the
the
guy from Starship Troopers. Sorry,
yeah,
no,
Starship Troopers and yeah, Gary Busey's son. That's him because it's basically Gary.
yeah,
He basically looks exactly like his
yeah,
father.
yeah, yeah,
So and he's a very weird character. So I feel like it's very much is played by like a laugh almost where it's just like it's over exaggerant. And I think this
yeah.
is like because my whole thing is like, overall this whole season has been over the top in everything that it does. It doesn't really do anything subtle. It just goes for it and just like, yeah, this is what it is.
Well,
Like,
I
you
mean,
know, same with the Russians, same with
well, you
the
see,
80s stuff. So I feel like the whole sexism thing in this is just like it is played very much for like obvious like let's just ratchet this up to like 11 and see how this
an
goes.
11. I
Yeah.
don't know. I think like if it was just kind of like, you know, even later on, like the whole office is laughing at it. Like, I don't know. It's just like it didn't really make me like. It's one thing when you had like people being snide and like undermining her and telling her to like, you know, oh, go make coffee or put like mustard in my sandwich. Like, I can understand like you know, colleagues being assholes to you at work. But they just kind of exaggerated it, and especially given that I think you know, Jonathan kind of pushes back on her because he obviously doesn't want to you know, do like the investigation because they might lose their jobs. And given that like one of the things that happens in this series for season 3 is you find out that the buyers might be losing their house or will be selling their house, because obviously they don't have the money. And so I could kind of the problem is like there isn't a big focus on John anymore, and I guess that's the big problem with like both of these two characters, because they were good in season 1, um, when they had like a character arc that they needed to do. Like, John was like, bullied. He was like an outcast, and he liked Nancy, but like, were they going to get together? Yes, no. Yeah, all these things, like, they were exploring. But now that their character arcs have been completed and they're a couple, unfortunately, like, all you can really do is like, ooh, they're gonna have tension, and are they gonna break up, and are they gonna fight? Like, that's all they can do, and it's very one dimensional.
They're
So
very much the info dump almost. That's
yeah,
basically the plot relevance of those characters, because they don't really do much, and they're probably writing it being like they have nothing else to do rather than, like, since they work at the newspaper, they're basically our source of information that could help someone in the plot somewhere at some point. Because they
yeah,
don't really have much to do up until, like, obviously they meet up with the kids later on, but that's like the second last episode basically. uh,
yeah. Their investigation, like, kind of comes down to, oh, like, they find out that, like, oh, the rats eating like the fertilizer, but why? I don't even think like the show does a very good job at really explaining why they took the fertilizer either. Like, they kind of say, oh, like, what happens when you get chemicals and you combine them together, you form a new chemical. It's like, okay, but like but like, how does that fit into them making the big grotesque monster? Like, again, I get what they were trying to do. I just think they shouldn't introduce ideas and concepts if they're not gonna do a better job at explaining what the outcome of those things are. But it doesn't ruin the show for me. It's just very weird that like they have them exploring this plot, but they don't follow through with it as the series progresses. They obviously have some pretty cool moments where, oh, like, obviously there's because a bit of a body snatcher situation happens, because one of the characters, Billy, who was introduced last season alongside his half sister Matt, um, Billy ends up being a an antagonist um, in the series, as he gets more or less coerced by the Mind Flayer into doing its bidding. Um,
which is
now,
probably, which
I
to be honest is probably the best option. They could probably go with the character of Billy, because I
honestly,
think even with season 2 there wasn't really much for him to kind of do, or
oh
like
yeah,
he
but both of
doesn't really fit in the rest of the group of the gang. So it's like we basically have to make him like something
a
has to
bit,
happen
yeah.
to him, or else he's
Well,
just going to be there doing nothing.
yeah, well, that's the thing with Billy's character. Like, I didn't like him last season because, again, they introduced him, and they kind of introduced him almost to be like a antagonist character for Steve, because Steve used to be that jock character, but then in season 2, Steve becomes like a loser, right? Like, more or
And
less,
season
because
3 even worse of a loser. So
even worse. Yeah. Like, everybody shits on Steve even more. It kind of sucks because a lot his character used to be like at least like somewhat competent, but then like if it like but then it's like everybody shits on him for being
yeah,
like an idiot.
they did turn into a bumbling idiot this season.
Oh yeah. We'll talk about that later on. But the thing with Billy's character, I guess, I do like that they finally made him a villain. But again, they do this thing later in the season where they give him a redemption last minute. Like, I literally talked about this in, I want to say, like, maybe two podcasts ago with Godzilla, the Gods of Monsters, or whatever it is,
King of the
whatever it's
Monsters,
called,
yeah, yeah.
King of the Monsters, where shows they'll do a thing where they introduce a villain and they'll do all this bad shit, and then like right at the end they have something that's supposed to redeem them, and they do the same thing for Billy. It's like, why not just like make him a bad person? Like, the dude literally, like, throughout the film, like, he tries to seduce I think Mike's mom.
Pretty much, yeah.
um Oh, and oh, by the way, that's a plot hole right there. Because later in the series, where he gets infected and gets mind controlled, he knocks her out. I don't know if you
Yeah, I know.
remember
I
that.
remember he knocks
Happened.
it out, and I thought there was gonna be major consequences. I'm like, man, if you knock
Nope.
someone out, you're gonna like some shit's gonna happen.
Yeah, like I mean, I don't know if it's supposed to be like a kind of commentary on like like domestic violence or something like that. Like they just knock he knocks her out, and then the next time we see her, she's fine. And I'm like, that's really weird. That like it's never gets reported. She doesn't tell anyone. She would have like got knocked out in like an unrestricted area for those lifeguards, because basically Billy is a lifeguard that everybody is like perving on because he's like really attractive
And
or
and they
whatever.
and they parodied the scene from what is it? Fast Times at Regiment High, which is they keep on referencing Phoebe Cates, which is the main character, one of the main characters who's in
Hmm.
that scene. So I felt like that was a really good reference. But yeah,
Yeah, so
basically he's a lifeguard working at the pool, and he basically just gets infected. But yeah,
yeah,
basically has a fan of,
um,
I guess, older mums really liking him.
yeah. I mean, look, they kind of reference to when I think Mike's mom was reading like an erotic novel, and the main character like on the front cover of the book like looked one for one like Billy. So there was like this kind of flirty interaction there. But yeah, it was just really weird that they had that as a point. Like, oh, is she gonna cheat on him or what? Like cheat with him or whatever. But then they never plot, especially since he like knocks her out in an unrestricted area at the pool. So yeah, it's just very odd. But yeah, the thing is, he starts like kidnapping people and like basically um, giving them to this creature that the Mind Flayer was creating. I'm a little bit disappointed that they didn't call it name it after another Dungeons and Dragons monster, but it doesn't really matter. It's not that big of a deal. I just like when they do the D&D references, because all we had was what was it, Will kind of asking everybody to play Dungeons and Dragons, and nobody wants to play. I think I kind of like that particular recurring joke that was happening as
Well,
the series
yeah, I think it just
continued.
shows evolutions of the characters. I think that was also a thing as well, like a theme of this season was people just maturing.
Yeah,
Because
and growing up.
yeah, because we do have I think the first like 30 minutes of the first episode is Hopper kind of dealing with I guess 11 and Mike's like relationship.
Hmm.
Him trying to be a dad.
Yeah, trying to be a dad and like not really knowing one how to be a dad, and then two dealing with a daughter who has like superpowers, right? It's pretty tough to navigate, and it's kind of it's been pretty tough for Hopper this season as well, just because he's also kind of has a thing for Winona Ryder's character Joyce, and he's trying to like flirt with her, but Joyce is obviously still kind of having a lot of like PTSD from the event of the last season, where her partner, I think Bob, um, ends up dying, and she kind of wants to. I don't know. It's weird. Like she not weird, but like she rejects or rebuffs his attempts to try and like go make a move on it.
Mm.
And she kind of is this is the thing. While I like Joyce's character, it kind of the escalation for her character doesn't make sense, because later on, like when they kind of invade Starcourt, she's the only one who kind of seems out of place being there, just because again Hopper's got like experience using guns and using weapons. I forget the nerdy guy's name, but he's kind of is important because he's good at like hacking and stuff like that.
Speaks
um
Russian.
he speaks Russian, like I love that. He's very, he was good last season. Kind of does the same thing this season, but that's Murray. So yeah, like he, but that's what you want from him after all. But yeah, Joyce seems to like get really obsessed with the magnets, which kind of is really funny.
Which is another meme where it's like, what about the magnets?
Yeah,
Um,
how do they work
yeah, well,
exactly?
basically, yeah. So like as mentioned before, like I would say that was probably the C storyline as well.
Yeah, that would be the C story.
Where basically, yeah, you have Hopper, Joyce, and and basically the other guy that speaks Russian as well as the Russian scientists kind of working together and seeing about the Russians, I suppose, and what type of science experiments that they're gonna have. Which, by the way, they bring back the teacher for like one scene. I think they probably have to do that because they're just like, everyone really liked the teacher in the first two seasons, so we have to bring him back for at least one scene. And he was a pretty cool character.
Well, one of the kind of because one of the things that happens is find out Starcourt is buying up all this land because they Hopper kind of busts in and like interrogates the mayor and finds out they're buying all this land and what are they doing and they found what he's kind of affectionately called Smirnov, who's the who's the Russian scientist that they find at one of these facilities. He's probably one of my favorite characters in the season, like new characters, because his attitude is like completely like I don't know how to really describe it. Just like kind of like Alexei is his real name, but like he's kind of eccentric Russian scientist, and he has a lot of attitude, and it's really funny to see like Hopper, Murray kind of coming back, and he's they go to him because he speaks Russian, and he translates for Hopper to find out what's going on with like the Russians and what the big plot is. But there's obviously this big like power struggle between the two, and it's really fun to see all that happening. It's probably one of the better stuff that happens in the C storyline, which is why it's really really good.
Yeah, I enjoyed my time with those characters as well, and being chased by basically Arnold Schwarzenegger, like
Schwarzenegger, exactly.
yeah, I feel like it they have their own thing. Basically all the storylines are all separated in different groups, basically.
Well, I was gonna say, so would you consider the A storyline being Dark Court? Like, what is it? Dustin and Steve, going to Stark Court? Would you consider that the A storyline? Because that's the thing I'm kind of confused about. Because I guess like the I guess 11, Mike, Max, like they're kind of and Lucas, like they're couples, but they're kind of having a bit of an argument because I guess Hopper told Mike to stop interacting with 11, and that leads to him having to lie to 11, and 11 kind of finds out, and they kind of have a moment with her and Max, which is kind of funny because I in my review talked about how 11 doesn't even acknowledge Max in last season, which I totally forgot about. Like, she doesn't even care who Max is.
Yeah, basically it was like there's another girl in the group type of thing.
Yeah, like, but she didn't care. Whereas Max kind of was like trying to get her attention. Whereas this season, like, 11 goes to her because she kind of doesn't know who else to go to talk about like relationship problems. And Max's character this season, like, she kind of has only one important role last season, which was the fact that she could drive a car, and that's it. Whereas this season, she's kind of like the friend that helps like 11 deal with like a quote unquote bad boyfriend. Although I think she kind of does lead her down like a really bad path, but it kind of makes sense. I don't know. They don't do a good job at explaining that her parent, I guess her biological mom, and her dad probably don't have the most healthiest relationships, and so it's kind of reflected that like her and Lucas doesn't have one, and so she gives bad advice out. But that's not really explained in the show. But you can kind of think about, okay, that's probably the reason why she's not really being a good person with how she advises 11 with her relationship with Mike. But they even mention like Lucas mentioned he talks to Mike like, oh yeah, me and Max, we broke up like 4 times, and it's like, oh okay, like again it's kind of them exploring what it is to be young and in love and being in relationships and kind of struggling to figure it out. Also the fact that your girlfriend's a superpowered individual, so you don't really want to piss her off too much. But yeah, the other thing is I think they're kind of hinting that what is it? Will is gay. I think that's like something that's happening because I think Mike says to Will like, oh, when they're talking about, oh, play D&D all day just because you don't like girls, and it kind of seemed like, oh, okay, like maybe that is something like
Yeah, maybe. I think I just played it as an innocent, like, when you are like 7 or like 12 or whatever,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
more
yeah.
like,
You see,
oh, girls, oh, who knows? But obviously these days, basically anything that's relatively innocent in that terms is just like, nah, go to be gay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You see, it's the exact same for me as well, because I'm like, okay, usually that would mean like, oh, he's just calling him immature, right? But I think it's definitely, the way that a lot of shows these days do it is like they'll introduce like an LGBT character like well, they will attempt to try and introduce him in like a subtle way, because we do have another character who gets introduced LGBT as well. But yeah, yeah, that's kind of like the B storyline. There's not really too much going on there other than like, oh, like they're kind of having their relationship problems. It all kind
I
of
think as
like,
well as like dealing with kind of Billy, being a
yeah, Billy as
super
well, yeah,
zombie
but
thing.
yeah, but that all kind of coalesces like towards the end, right? But the other thing that happens, and I guess this is kind of the A storyline, which is kind of like the gang that I liked every time they were on screen, is when we had Steve, Dustin, together, and Dustin kind of with a new character called Robin. Dustin comes back from camp, and Steve is working at a ice cream store with his coworker Robin, and they kind of catch up. But Dustin picks up like a radio frequency of Russians talking, and so he wants to kind of get Steve's help and tries to figure out, oh, what are they doing? What are they saying? Is this some kind of Russian invasion of America and stuff? Robin, the coworker, she helps. Like she overhears and she helps because she knows like multiple languages and tries to figure out what they're saying.
Also, it's
Um,
probably because they're really bored at the ice cream place. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, they're just selling ice cream, and it's the '80s, right? The one thing I'll point out, it's a bit of a plot hole, right? Because again, I picked this up and I was just like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that this happened. So they mention that, oh, um, this underground facility is producing this radio wave, um, but at the same time, Steve picks up that he can hear the sound of like a horse, like this mechanical horse that you can ride, like it's like one of the rides
yeah,
at the
the
mall,
song is
right?
basically Daisy Daisy. That song.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the thing is like, yeah, from the radio transmission, he can hear that that song being played. But if this is in some underground Russian base, how are they hearing that song? It doesn't make sense,
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. True, true. Because I think the whole point with that was
Yeah,
that
to
whole
basically
nursery
explain
rhyme
that.
song does not exist in Russia, or what they expect would be in Russia, because it's like an American song. So they're just like,
Well, no, no,
therefore
I think
meaning it wouldn't be,
no,
in
no, no.
Russia.
I don't even think that. That's not even what it is, because they know that where they're picking it up, it has to be on American soil, because that's what Dustin makes this big structure that basically allows him to have like unlimited radio waves like in America, so he can talk to his girlfriend that he met on camp, which by the way I totally knew was going to play a plot, right? Because everybody was just shitting on him, so you knew that it was going to be
Yeah,
real.
that or
One of
like,
those.
yeah, the first like half an hour when they're just like, yeah, I have this radio thing that can access all the radio things. I'm like, yeah, that's gonna play a part somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. But the main thing is like the point of them hearing the song was in order to prove that, oh, this was actually happening um here at Starcourt, right? That was the main, because it's like you wouldn't hear that song like, yeah, in Russia. That's one point, but it's like the song is playing because it's happening here in Starcourt, like somewhere the radio transmissioning is happening, and this song is in the background. But the problem is, how are they hearing this song in the background if like it's underground, um and the facility like is nowhere near where this like rocking horse is, right? Also, they have really big problems like when they go down there to investigate the facility in trying to get a radio signal out there. So it's very difficult to it's very selective, like as when the radios work and when they don't. But yeah, it's one of those things that it doesn't break the show, but it's just like, it could have had something there where it's like, oh, like there was actually like a radio at that place where that person was giving the message. Anyway, but I really liked it because it kind of reminded me of like those old kind of 80s films where like, yeah, kids are kind of working together to take down like kind of like in a Home Alone-esque kind of like way, obviously they're not making traps in the house, but it's them taking down the big bad guy.
Yeah, I think that was the I guess the beauty of, I think, the first season. It very much invoked something like the Goonies and those types of things where it's just teenagers and teenage things help to save the day. Where it's kind of like I think I remember the first season where it was like, how do we take down these demons? It's not like guns. It's like our skateboard and baseball bat and and I think that's what they do with this season as well. Where it's like, how do we take out this monster? I don't know. We take it out with fireworks. I forgot his name, but he has a slingshot. Basically all these little things that like it's childhood items, basically helping with these future threats that even adults can't take care of. I really do like the adventure part of it as well.
Yeah, I think the fact that you had a bunch of kids like finding the facility, this underground Russian facility, and they even like make fun of the Russian like commander or whatever. It's like, you think you're like so smart, but you guys got found out by a bunch of kids. Like that I kind of did like that being thrown in there.
And once again, it is pretty dark because you're just like, man, like these like these relatively like kids, like very young, like teenagers, basically just getting beat up and stuff, like especially Steve. You're like, man, like I for a second there I did think someone was gonna die, but can't
they can't get rid of Steve just yet. But yeah. So and they also introduced Lucas's sister Erica. Like she has like a bigger role in this season. I kind of found her pretty annoying, but I think like once they kind of got her to actually do something, she became much more tolerable, because most of the time she was just kind of being like, oh, you guys are old nerds and
what do I get out of all this? What do I do?
Yeah, but I guess like once she kind of they kind of fill her in on like the bigger plot and the implications of them doing all those tests, and like with all the I guess the upside down and all that, she definitely kind of like changed her tune a little bit. So there's a potential to have her be in the future seasons, and have a bigger role, but we'll have to see. But yeah, that's kind of like I guess the main kind of stories that happened in I guess storylines that happen in season 3, and they all kind of coalesce with like the big fight that happened at Starcourt. I liked it. It definitely was like a big improvement, I guess, from like some of the previous the stuff in the previous season.
Because the previous season, it was like the tension was what was it? It was like even the one where it was forgot his name, but he has the demons or whatever stuck in his body, and it's basically exorcism almost. So I'm like, it's kind of whatever.
You see that's the thing. Like Joyce's character being involved in that makes a lot of sense, because it has to do with her son. So she has like a lot of emotional kind of investment in that particular thing. And the problem is like, yeah, I liked it, but the problem with Will is that they just kind of have him there being like not necessarily a wet blanket, because I kind of understand, like, he wants to hang out with his friends for the summer and stuff, but the problem is they only really use a Stranger Thing detector, like every time the upside down or like the what is it, the mind flayer was nearby, the back of his neck would start like flaring up or whatever. But it's like it didn't really help, because everybody would already know that the danger's there, and then he'd touch his neck and be like, the danger's here.
It's like,
no
okay,
shit,
then
Sherlock.
the danger's here. Now the danger's here. Now let's get 11 to help instead of you. And I thought they were going to do something where it's like he gets powers, I don't know, or something like that. But clearly they didn't.
Yeah.
And I think like in the end, the overall plot point is like in the end of the last episode, basically Will's family does leave. Um,
Yeah.
so because that's the thing, because even if because that's the thing. My problem is that 11 goes with them, which by the way, spoilers, because Hopper dies, but does he really die? Who knows? But like,
I don't think he's dead, but I also don't think he's because there's like a stick around for like the after credit sequence because they mention that like they show a Russian facility and it's like not the American, the other one. Now I don't think the American is Hopper. It might be because I think that's what they're trying to make you think that Hopper's not dead and he's there, but I think Hopper might have went into the upside down. Because he may have went into the big hole. You know how like there was that machine generating the big,
basically
rift,
the breach that will
the
bring the
breach or
monsters
whatever.
in from like the upside down or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he would have jumped in there, because the big thing that happened is he couldn't escape in time, and Joyce had to shut down the machine with him still out there, which would have vaporized him. But I think he jumped into the upside down to try and survive. And the American might be like Eleven's dad, who they introduced, I think in season 2. I think there's the potential for that character to be the American, just to have him like later be introduced, in season 4 or something like that. That's my bold prediction,
Yeah,
for
but
where that is.
very very bold. But that's the thing. It's like she basically moves with the Will family.
Yeah,
And I thought that was very weird. I thought she was gonna not she was gonna go with another family.
I think it makes
Just
sense
for the
because
sole
that's
purpose
what.
of like she is relatively one of the main characters as in like I feel like more or less this is kind of her story, as well as like Will and his whole family. They don't really need to be a part of like season 4 almost. Like I felt like it was a very good ending point for that if they really
Nah,
needed to.
no. Here's the thing. The problem is, I disagree because I think the thing is the entire plot of Stranger Things need the original kind of four boy in it. And they even mentioned that you can come back and visit like next Christmas and stuff. So I could imagine that Stranger Things season 4 might be happening during Christmas or Thanksgiving. Have they had an episode during Christmas? No, right?
Probably sort of. I don't know. I think
I don't know. I
the
don't know
first
if they
season was
have.
during winter, right?
I don't think. But I don't think. Oh, maybe. Yeah, actually,
And
you're
there
right.
was the
It was
Christmas
during Christmas.
lights. Yeah,
It had. Yeah, it was Christmas. So maybe they'll do something like. They'll have to pick like another holiday because that seems to be the thing that they do. Like this season it was
4th of
4th of July,
July.
right? So I can imagine them doing like and then like last season it was Halloween. And in season 1, as we mentioned, it was Christmas. So I can imagine them doing something else, like doing Thanksgiving, because they even mentioned,
Ramadan.
Ramadan. Who knows? But like, they're gonna pick a time, an 80s American centric holiday period. So I can imagine them doing, if they're gonna do, 5 seasons or something like that. Season 4 could be set during, Thanksgiving, and then season 5 could be set during Christmas again to kind of go full circle if they were gonna end the series like back, kind of how it was at the beginning, so
Well,
to
that's the thing.
speak.
They kind of do a lot of callbacks from the first season in this season, which is really cool. There are certain things that characters said, but even using in the last episode of this season, what is it? Peter Gabriel's version of "Heroes," the David Bowie song, is basically a callback from like the first season in one of the episodes that ended with that song. And yeah, it was kind of very
Oh,
touching
okay.
because
I must have
because
missed it.
that's the thing. I remember that song. I'm like, oh yeah, that was from like the first season. So that's why I thought like, and I was kind of thinking in my head, I'm like, yeah, this could be a very good ending, like almost to the whole series because everything's kind of
Nah,
wrapped up
it's not
almost.
ending.
It's kind of wrapped up
It's not
almost.
ending.
11 doesn't have her power. She's a normal girl now. Um,
100% it's not ending.
I
Like
know
with
it's
that
not
after
ending,
credit.
but I feel like that could have it like if it got
No.
canceled somehow, I'd have been like, I'm happy with what
No
happened.
way. They wouldn't have left the after credit ending if that was the case. The thing is, all of it is supposed to set up a new status quo. The thing is, I kind of agree that it's a little bit weird that 11 went with Joyce and Mike and John, but only because like their family is poor. Um, it it's like them adopting another person only puts like a lot more financial strain on their family. But I think the whole reason Joyce adopts her is because like she's like probably feels guilty for Hopper's death, and that's probably the reason why she took Millie Bobby Brown's character along with her. But yeah, it would have maybe made sense like if maybe like she lived with like Max or something like that, like given that Billy died and they kind of need a to replace him, like kind of. I don't it would have been, but I think the main reason is like first to show like, ooh, it's a status quo shift, and ooh, 11 doesn't have her powers, so it's season 4 is going to be about maybe the first 3 episodes 11 can't do anything, and she's struggling with being powerless,
And then maybe it's a whole thing
then
of like her trying to figure out like, like I need to, like what is it, like find out what happened, how do I get my powers beforehand, and trying to train that, and maybe it is related to it, trying to find what her dad did, and then her dad is in the Russian prison, like you mentioned.
Yeah, well, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it'll be like a classic thing where it's like, oh, she'll figure out that she doesn't, her powers doesn't define who she is, and oh, she's actually got, she's more than just her powers, and then just.
I think we lost Chatters. He died basically. The stream, he'll come back, or will he? Nobody knows. Maybe he went to the upside down. Dun. But yeah, basically, like Stranger Things season 3, I really did enjoy. I do like a lot of the references that they put, a lot of 80s references that they had. They had Dustin and his girlfriend, which by the way is real, singing the Neverending Story, which is actually kind of cute, also very relevant to the 80s. I watched Neverending Story when I was a kid. I really liked that movie, and it was kind of very cute for them to make them do that as well. They had a lot of references. They had the zombie movie that they showed, and as well as the whole basically end of the scene being the season being in a mall, which is very relevant to Dawn of the Dead, which is basically set in a mall as well, and the zombies are a euphemism for I guess people shopping in capitalism. So they had that in there as well, along with as well as Back to the Future. I think that's the most obvious kind of I guess relevant thing that they kind of put into the series. And I it's funny how they go into the theater, they're talking about back in time, and I feel like I really enjoyed the references that they had in this season.
Yeah, there are a lot of good references. Also, the other thing I really like is how like they have what is it? Steve and Robin, they get drugged, and then they have like they trip out. I kind of really like that scene as well, and how they walk into Back to the Future. Again, really great movie. If you haven't seen Back to the Future, go watch it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, didn't they have a whole thing where it's like you haven't watched Back to the Future? Like, I feel like out of everyone, like out of any movie franchise, I feel like Back to the Future is the one that people have seen the most, I would say. Like, I feel like nearly everyone's seen Back to the Future. Like, I can kind of understand Star Wars maybe, but Back to the Future, I feel like everyone's kind of seen it.
Back to the Future 2 in particular, I kind of find that, at least here in Australia, they always show Back to the Future 2. Even though, like, the first Back to the Future makes a lot more sense in terms of calling it Back to the Future, if that makes sense, if they technically go to the past. It's kind of weird that way, right? Great movies. But yeah, I was going to say, with any other particular highlights that come to mind with this season?
As you mentioned before, the the drug scene was very interesting. I did like the very like Material Girl like montage of like girls trying clothes on. That's a very like that is very much of the time.
Yeah. You know what? You're 100% right. I agree. That definitely is a staple.
You know,
And
where like, you know, they're in the mall, they're in the same location, but they keep on missing each other, like, oh, just by an inch, like,
yeah,
and I feel like that's what, as mentioned before, this is what this kind of season whole was. It was like, we're gonna make something in modern day, but it's gonna feel like something that was made in the '80s. So it has, like, you know, the cartoony, like, evil Russians to, like, you know, the montages to the music. I feel like a lot of it is like it feels like it was made in the '80s almost, the way it's kind of shot and everything like that.
mhm.
But yeah, there was some really interesting intrigue. I really did like the visuals of some of the I guess, mind bending things that Eleven does do. When, you know, for example, when she's kind of looking through, what is it, Billy's kind of mind and head, I felt like that was very interesting and very visually interesting. And
Mhm.
even the monster design, I thought was pretty cool. You
Yeah,
know,
Monsters. They definitely had a higher budget this season
oh yeah,
than
the
before.
monster looked good. Like,
Yeah. See, like for TV as well, like they're definitely pouring a lot more money into this in this franchise, which I always appreciate because the more money there is, the better it looks, the more people will watch it, and more people have watched it.
absolutely. But yeah,
And
that's basically all everything to say for season 3 of Stranger Things. Like, I really enjoyed it. Step above season 2, and
yeah,
hopefully they can keep it going to season 3 and kind of keep it in that same kind of feel and vibe.
do you have any predictions for next season for Stranger Things? Or do you think it's going to be more of the same, more Russians coming back and taking over America, or do you think they'll go in a different direction?
I honestly don't know, because if because, you know, the after credit scene, it's in Russia, so, but I don't think they're gonna be like, we're gonna go all the way to the US. So I don't know if they're gonna somehow, like, Eleven's gonna somehow get a portal or something, and then they're all gonna be in Russia. Maybe, I have no idea. As mentioned before, I thought like it ended in a relatively okay-ish manner, if it had to end. But because I felt very weird how everyone split up. And, you know,
But
one of the scenes, they do say, oh, maybe you can come back for, like, Thanksgiving or Christmas, we can
yeah,
spend it
yeah.
together.
I,
So clearly
again,
something like that's gonna happen.
the in my opinion, the whole thing about them splitting is purely just to be there superficially to kind of be like, is this the end of Stranger Things? But it isn't. Like that's the whole point. I think definitely don't read into that too much. But yeah, season three I think is really good. I don't know if you'd agree, but I think season one, then season three, then season two.
Yeah,
True.
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe if they go more horror next season, maybe that might be cool. But I don't know, like what, because again, it's like if they're gonna do this season, like again, they had a lot of I guess Coca-Cola references this season.
I think that a lot of
I
it, they
saw
had like
yeah,
7-Eleven as well.
yeah, but Coca-Cola, they literally had what is it? Lucas talk about why New Coke was like better and stuff. There was like a good minute that was dedicated to him explaining like, oh yeah, New Coke is like way better than regular Coke because it's like smooth taste and blah blah blah, and like everything like had Coke. I think Hungry Jack's as well, but like I think sorry, not Hungry Jack's, Burger King. It's called Hungry Jack's here in in Australia.
Mhm.
But yeah, so like I'm trying to think like if they're going to frame it in some other kind of 80s movies and what's going to be the next kind of thing. Some people mentioned that maybe they'll do it set in the 90s to kind of because all the characters are kind of growing up. All the actors are going to start growing up really fast, so maybe it might be a good idea to have them play an older version of their characters. Because I think Millie Bobby Brown's 15 at the moment, and I think they're definitely playing younger than 15.
Like,
Lost.
at some point they're gonna catch up. So it's kind of like they're gonna go further up. So it's like
Yeah, because I
they
think
gotta do
there's
something.
I think they're in junior high. But anyways, yeah, Stranger Things, it's still good. I don't think it jumps the shark. I think I like everything about this season.
Yeah, I suppose so. But yeah, um, pretty much, yeah. That's Stranger Things season 3. If you want to talk about that, but basically we'll just move on to our final review, which Chad has talked about it last week. Is Spider-Man Far From Home? And this is going to be kind of like our full spoilers talk, because yeah, if you want to listen to a non-spoiler talk, yeah, basically listen to last week's episode. So yeah, Spider-Man Far From Home. I finally saw it, and yeah, I feel like it's a pretty solid entry to the Marvel franchise. I think I have to pretty much watch Homecoming again to see which one I do prefer better, because I feel like they're very much meld in the same type of way. And yeah, but as mentioned before, the plot is Peter Parker goes to Europe, basically with his whole class, and then Nick Fury comes along, and it's just like, hey, there's these elementals that you kind of have to deal with, and this guy named Mysterio, well, name's not really Mysterio, is kind of there to help him, but as you find out, he's kind of evil, because, he's a Spider-Man villain. And yeah.
The thing about this movie, I think they did an excellent job at like introducing who Mysterio is, how they came. And the thing is, like, Spider-Man refers to him as Mysterio by accident because they're in Italy, and the news broadcast like referred to a mysterious man or something, and they call it Mysterio, and so he calls him Mysterio. But then like Mysterio like runs with it. It's like, yeah, I'm Mysterio now. And it kind of is really excellently done because, they kind of show the origins of Mysterio. He's trying to steal, Spider-Man's, Tony Stark's like glasses that give him access to an artificial intelligence called Edith, right? Edith basically having, access to all of Stark Industries, like, facilities and like databases
Technology and everything.
Technology, like everything. And the thing is, I kind of really liked how, and I didn't want to spoil it, last podcast, but I kind of like that. Oh, it's a group of Stark Industry employees working together to show off like these illusions. Like the previous version, iterations of Mysterio, it was like, oh, he uses like mirrors and gas and optical illusions.
He's a magician, basically.
Yeah, like to kind of give off. Well, in the comics, he was like a special effects artist essentially, right? Like that's how he was able to kind of give off this kind of thing. I liked how it was like an evolution of that kind of character in like a modern setting where it's like it's not just the one guy. He has like multiple people, like a sound designer. He probably had, he had like the drones pretending to be the elementals, but then it also had like all these imagery. So it was really cool to see like when they're orchestrating an attack, it was almost like they're doing like a theater production, right? With the character Mysterio, like his character, Quentin Beck, he created something during I want to say either one of the Iron Man movies, or it was during Civil War. I don't remember which one.
That one was the hologram one was Civil War, because it opened up
Okay.
with Tony Stark when he was like a kid, basically, and
kid.
they were just like, that's how Tony Stark's parents died. It was basically being like shoehorning in the whole death of the parents, therefore meaning the whole thing with Bucky. Which I really did like, that the use of that as well, and then on top of basically going to for the first Iron Man. For the first Iron Man as well. That was really cool. And then the rest obviously they didn't show because I don't think that happened in the thing, but they're just like, it's still relatively cool to someone to have that idea. And not only that, as you mentioned before, moving into like the 21st century with drones, and I feel like that was really interesting. But that's the thing. If you're going to be like a big critic about this, you'd be like, well, they didn't do as much with the saying of like I guess technology and things like that when it comes to drones and future tech, I suppose.
Well, they actually kind of do, but we'll talk about that in just a second. The one thing that I wanted to say, like to kind of bring that around, is like they actually had somebody who was like a storyteller, and he was the one who came up with the idea, like, oh, Quentin Beck came from an alternate universe, and they're alternate universes now. He was like a story writer, and like the whole reason why Quentin Beck was like, oh yeah, no, my name's Mysterio now, because again they mentioned that he believes that the only way that he could like have influence and power over the general populace was if they uh, they had to believe these fantasy stories or this fantastic story in order to consider him a hero in order to have that power. And that's a theme that kind of happens throughout the film where they're orchestrating these fake attacks. He even says like, "Oh, this attack on wherever is going to be like an Avengers level event, and that's going to give him like the respect and like the power that he needs." And for him, well, you can kind of see like the way he talks. He talks about himself first, but then he changes like, "Oh, and the team." You know,
He's basically a method actor, really. Yeah, and on top of that, it's very I guess it's very meta almost. It is talking about I guess the I guess superhero type of stuff and like it kind of framing in that type of world of like, and I feel like we don't really see much of that anymore, or as much of it where it's like the people like the effect of superheroes to humans. You very much see that in the Fox X-Men movies very early on, but then they kind of strayed away from it in the most recent X-Men movies. I do miss that element of the human aspect and how humans feel about certain things. I feel like that is not really a thing that's touched on as much. But yeah, in this one, they very much do touch upon that almost in a way of, basically being like worshipping false idols and false gods, which you can kind of say is what they kind of frame in like a Watchmen, sort of. Oh, I forgot what it was. It's not Watchmen, something else. But basically, kind of the same plot line.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of human reactions to things, how did you feel about like how they handled like what they refer to as the blip, where everybody kind of disappeared for the 5 years or whatever. Um,
Yeah, I think they did a relatively good job. Like, I think it's more of a side thing, almost.
yeah,
But like, I think moving forward, it's not really going to be like in the MCU. It's not really going to be referenced as much.
no,
I don't think. I feel like they're
yeah,
just going to be like, it happened. Let's move on. Like, it's not going to
yeah,
be
yeah,
an everlasting type of thing.
yeah. But the thing is, like, I kind of like that they again like referred to it. Like, it could have been just as easy for them to just be like, oh, and everything's the same again, and all the people who left, came back at like they all left at the same time. No, they kind of showed that, yeah, like the world kind of did change, and there are consequences from the events of Infinity War that rippled throughout like kind of the history, or oh sorry, and Endgame as well, that kind of rippled throughout like the history of the world. And there'll be a Wikipedia article referred to as the blip where people disappeared for 5 years. But it's really, but it's also done like in a comedic way as well. Like Peter's rival is like because he's obviously in love with MJ, but one of his other classmates, he didn't disappear, and he basically was like this scrawny nerdy kid, but because he stayed for that 5 years, he's now like this buff attractive guy. But because everybody went back to the same grade, even if you did like if you were in like grade 8, and then went up to grade 13 or 12 or whatever, you had to go back once everybody came back. So I kind of found that really funny that it does lead to like a weird dynamic that happens, where you'll technically be 5 years older than someone despite being born in the same year. Like it definitely adds like this whole weird dynamic that would happen like internally in the world. And I do also like, I think one of the teachers who's like he's one of the field trip advisors, he says, yeah, my wife pretended that she disappeared and ran away with her fitness instructor. Like I just kind of found that hilarious. It was a great like one liner thing that like, yeah, I could believe like that would have happened in that world. It made it feel more organic,
Yeah, it's a,
as
it's a
yeah,
good
this
world
is something
building
that
thing,
existed.
even though it was
Yeah.
played as a joke.
Exactly. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed like the where they went like all around Europe, Paris. I think they went to Amsterdam, I think at one stage.
Just
Um,
a bit, yeah.
oh,
And then yeah,
yeah,
then the
and Prague.
Prague, yeah.
Yeah, there's all these like great locations across Europe, that I really like. Italy, obviously, they hung out there initially as well. I think they just did like a really good job. And also the other thing is, Tony kind of represents, like kind of replaces Uncle Ben, in the Spider-Man mythos in this series. I don't know if you kind of picked that up. I kind of
Yeah,
felt
pretty
like
much. Yeah.
that was the case. Like, because Uncle Ben is kind of like a kind of not really talked about so much in um, this kind of iteration of Spider-Man, right? And Tony Stark kind of plays the pseudo like replacement for him, and with his death, like Spider-Man feels really guilty that like he couldn't do anything, and he has to live up to like the big mantle that Tony Stark left behind for him. Which obviously Quentin Beck kind of manipulates, which I thought was actually a really bad thing. I kind of hate it when these things happen. It actually technically happens in Stranger Things as well, but like, where certain characters will become stupid in order to drive the plot forward. Because him giving Quentin Beck the glasses and giving him the password, giving him access, like I could never believe that Spider-Man would ever do that.
Yeah, pretty much. As well as the I guess the whole thing of like if that was the last gift that Tony Stark gave, like, and he's really emotionally attached to Tony Stark, I do not believe for 1 second he'd be like, oh, the last thing that he gave me, I'm totally gonna just give that away really nilly. And I think
Yeah.
kind of mentioning before with this type of this movie is like I found it enjoyable, but I did find some problems with it. I think that was one of them. Where they do try to play around the whole like Tony Stark's dead. Are you willing enough to be an Avenger, or are you willing enough to like take away your, I guess, boy life with like MJ
Yeah,
versus
high school life, yeah.
being a superhero. I didn't feel like that storyline didn't come to its full kind of impact as it could be. Um,
I guess the thing.
especially when you consider it to Spider-Man 2, which I still think is the best Spider-Man film made. It does that pretty much, and it does it a lot better and a lot more efficiently. Basically
I think that
doing the storyline where he gives up, he throws the Spider-Man suit in the garbage can. I think that does it in a lot better way.
I think the thing is like with the pressure that Peter was getting from Samuel L. Jackson's character as Nick Fury, it actually does get explained why he was really like kind of pushy towards Spider-Man. But it kind of gets revealed at the end, which we'll talk about in a moment. But one of the things I wanted to point out is that I really like the scene where Spider-Man's figured out, okay, Quentin Beck's a bad guy. Okay, I got to go find Tony Stark. Um, but then you have Mysterio kind of putting him in these virtual reality scenarios, much like like in Arkham Asylum, like you have those the Scarecrow levels, those Scarecrow missions where you're kind of walking around Arkham and it's like this maze where you don't really understand what's happening and it throws you for a loop. I really like those moments where Peter wasn't sure whether he was like in an illusion or not. There's obviously the scene where he's fighting and it's like in a hallway, um, but then it kind of shows like, oh, Samuel L. Jackson came, shot him. Okay, everything's okay. I'm like, no way, this is still an illusion. Come on.
I did like the disjointedness of that, where it's kind of like a shock thing almost, where it's just like, what the hell just happened, and then it's like, obviously it didn't actually happen, but I feel like it was a good play on, I guess, not only just the characters inside the movie, but as well as the audience when they were watching the movie as well, if they did get fooled by it, because yeah, that
yeah,
was pretty quick, like.
yeah. I think I agree. Like if you're not familiar with the character, it would have probably been very like shocking to see. Oh, okay, it is actually still going. The one thing, yeah, again, this is another example of characters suddenly being stupid for plot reasons, like Mysterio being the very meticulous guy he is. He lets a train hit Spider-Man, but doesn't confirm whether Spider-Man's dead or not. I thought that was um, something that I wouldn't expect, like a really smart supervillain, especially in that scenario, to like, oh yeah, I'll just assume that Spider-Man's dead. Like, yeah, if you're gonna check all your balances when it comes to these superheroes, and you probably should have had like a drone follow that train just to make sure that Spider-Man was dead, right? Because obviously he wasn't dead. despite being hit by like a bullet train. Holy shit.
Yeah, but it's
Um,
Spider-Man. Which
it's fun.
if we're talking about like power sets, I think another thing that I didn't 100% fully believe in this movie, and they
Mm.
didn't really do much of it until like right at the end. It was kind of a plot point. Is the whole Spidey sense thing? They call his the
Peter
tingle.
Tingle.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
tingle.
yeah.
But that's the thing. I don't think they ever really reference that he has a problem with it coming back up until like when it becomes plot relevant, being like, oh, like I can sense these
Right.
drones, but like my tingling sense aren't working anymore. I'm like, whoa, when did this happen? Like,
Yeah,
I
I
felt I was
guess
like, whoa, I like no one mentioned it before
I
until
think
now. Like,
I,
yeah,
I think I think the point was that like because he was he was kind of being disjointed with like because he just didn't want to be Spider-Man because he was Spider-Man the entire time, right?
mm,
Um, he was just purely interested in just being a teen, going on this trip, and like getting MJ to like him, right? I think that was like the main focus for the actual movie itself.
mm,
But well, sorry, well, what Peter wanted to do, but he kept being thrown into the life of Spider-Man, and I think the point was like because he was having problems with like living up to the legacy of Tony Stark and he wanted to be normal, that's the reason why he was having problems with his quote unquote Peter Tingle. Because again, they establish it before, because they establish it. Actually, now that I think about it, they actually do establish it when he has that conversation with Aunt May, because she says to him, "Oh, you're still having like problems with your Peter Tingle or something like that," and he's like, "Don't call it the Peter Tingle," and it's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, whatever." Right?
mm.
And so yeah, he was just happy to not be Spider-Man, and I think that's what he was struggling with, and that's when they introduce it. It's just not something that comes back until later on, where he's like, okay, no, I need to get out of my funk if I want to beat Mysterio. And I actually really like the fight. Again, I think this movie looked brilliant, right? Like
Yeah, I
all the
think that the
CG.
colors really well, especially like Mysterio being green, like a very neon green. I feel like that's a very cool
Oh,
look.
the other great thing is, if you noticed, the the his suit, his green suit, is essentially his mocap, right? So they kind of do like has they kind of show him as being like a combination of like Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and that's the kind of character he is. Like that's what his suit is designed for. But when he's out of the illusion, he's like just wearing this green mocap suit. But the mocap suit is a reference to um, the actual skin tight suit that his character originally wore in the original comics. So I kind of like that they did like a modern look, and then they also reference the old look in a very, again, organic way that makes a lot of sense and does a good homage to the original comic book counterpart.
Mm. Yeah, well,
Um,
that's what I like when people do that, where it's more of an organic way to kind of put those things in. Speaking of which, like, what did you think about the rest of the side cast? Because me personally, I'm like they kind of did their job of kind of putting some subplot lines and some information here and there, but they were kind of there for the ride almost. His best friend was just kind of chilling, having a girlfriend and stuff. It's very much
yeah,
like the comedic appeal of the movie.
yeah, I did like how he did like a 180 from being like a bachelor to, oh yeah, I have a a girlfriend for this entire like science trip, and that like contrasted with what Peter wanted to do. So I found it really funny. It was a good kind of foil to have against the struggles of what Peter was doing. You also had, I think, Flash Thompson, I think, just being a jerk. But he's also kind of like a little bit of like a social media buzz. But you can also see like from his messages, like yeah, he has like problems at home with his mom and stuff like that. So yeah, I do like there's like aspects of the side characters that are interesting. Zendaya as MJ, I still think it's a big mistake to have um, MJ not be Mary Jane. I don't know. I just feel really weird that like her character is just like is quote unquote reimagined, but
Yeah,
it's almost like a completely
I do not
different
like it.
character.
I think Zendaya does a good job of like what she's given, and obviously the whole point of the character is just kind of like a very socially awkward, a very like monotone, basically a Daria type, which is basically
Yeah,
a basically 180 degrees turn of what MJ's character is. Because at that point, you might
yeah.
as well make a new character. But now
Why
they're just
not?
like,
Like
yeah, you know.
that's my problem. Like, the whole concept of like, there's a whole thing about. I think I said a very similar thing, with Homecoming as well. They kind of introduce her officially towards the end that she's MJ. Although I think she's referred to as Michelle Jones, right? But that's her name, Michelle Jones. I, I I don't know. I feel that she's a good character, but she's nothing like her comic book counterpart. Um, and at that stage, it's like, why not just have her be an original character for the movie? Um, because they do that all the time. They did it with Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn became a popular comic book character, and then is now getting her own live action movie because they had her in a cartoon as an original character, being Joker's girlfriend or Joker's like sidekick kind of character.
Mm.
They can easily do that and have a new character, have that, and then maybe even have her transition into the comics. But I find it's just a missed opportunity, especially since like they could have just had like a new love interest for Peter. And
Which, by the way,
that
is
would
like
be
I
okay
guess that
too.
lead that's kind of like in the end type of thing. It's like I don't know what their type of relationships will be in the future. Like I feel like I think it's like it's kind of thrown in at the end of this. Like yeah, they kind of get together. I guess they're sort of gonna date in the future. They kind of have a
I mean,
relationship, but then
yeah,
yeah,
they're obviously in a relationship. Come on, man. What are you
I'm
talking
just
about?
saying, but like basically, if we want to kind of more or less skip to kind of, I guess the end credit scene, Mysterio kind of had a kind of final backup safe plan.
Oh, so this is what I was mentioning, that yes, they do actually do a lot of um I guess uses of like modern technology, because they essentially use like obviously it's not explicitly said that it is this, but he essentially uses like deep fake technology to um like masquerade the whole event to seem like Spider-Man is the one who caused the big terrorist attack in London, and not him. And essentially Spider-Man shoots and kills him, right? I thought that was excellent, and it kind of sets up once again, and it's also said by Jonah Jameson, who is once again played by his original actor from the original Spider-Man movies. I was very very surprised that he came back to
Let's be honest,
play.
they could not cast anyone else. I got it. Like
No, but
there was just no way. I'm
they
like
no
nah.
no 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 no. They could have. They 100% could have. The difference is that they didn't, and that shows that Marvel is willing to have people from like previous films to come back in some other capacity. It's not like a taboo that, oh, we have to make them forget this iteration of J. Jonah Jameson, because that's going to confuse them with a previous version. Like having J.K. Simmons come back um, is really good for the franchise. Because again, people who know his character, people who know him as an actor, will come and be like, oh, that's really cool that he's coming back, and hopefully he'll play like a bigger role in the new movie coming up. But they have him play like an essentially what is like an Alex Jones kind of character, which I kind of really like. I like the take on it. So instead of like the Daily Bugle being like a newspaper, kind of place, it's like his own kind of online talk show called thedailybugle.net. The only issue I had with this was I couldn't, if he's supposed to play like Alex Jones, I couldn't imagine his face being plastered on like a giant screen. I don't think that kind of makes sense.
Hmm.
If he was like, if they were going to have him play like a Fox News kind of anchor, so to speak, then I can kind of imagine them being like main and center news. But yeah, but I really like this direction, because again, it's kind of going towards the classic comic direction of everybody hates Spider-Man, including J. Jonah Jameson, and he has to kind of deal with everybody hating him and the fact that his identity just got revealed. So it sets up like a really, really interesting premise for I guess the future Spider-Man movie that's coming out.
Mm.
And it actually makes me excited to see, oh, what is the next film going to be about? I don't know about you. I really like this particular mid-credit scene.
I feel like I think it plays on it very interesting because yeah, when you don't really see that this type of storyline, and I like as someone where there's so many comic book stuff and there could be fatigue of just the same type of plot. I do like that. You know, you can frame the hero as a villain now. People hate him, as well as knowing his secret identity as Peter Parker. I feel like now is basically it kind of changes the game almost. Like he probably won't be
Well,
able to go to school. You know, basically he'll have to stay at Stark Tower. There's a lot of like it will basically
well,
shift to him
I
figuring
think the
stuff
thing
out.
is with I think the thing is like I don't think it necessarily any of that will happen. The thing is, Spider-Man is classically hated by the public, and like like he like he's either loved by people or he's kind of considered a menace because of the framing that J. Jonah Jameson does of him. Like vigilantes are bad. Leave things to the police. So it's not something that's unseen. It's interesting that it isn't something that happens from the get-go of the comic. Like it's literally, oh, there's this story, this fake, quote unquote, fake news story that happened of Spider-Man, but nobody knows it. And J. Jonah Jameson, because he's the new kind of, I guess his publication or website is kind of trying to grab clickbait titles or whatever. They just kind of roll with it and is putting out this story that makes Spider-Man look bad. I think what will essentially happen is Peter will try and retain his normal life, and he'll try and figure out a way to try and deny the fact that he's Spider-Man. And you will have to try and follow how he does that, because I think they'll still have all the because the thing is they'll have to have his supporting cast. Like Zendaya will be in it, his best friend will be in it, like Flash will be in it, and they have to have him be at school doing that. But I think the struggle will be, oh, how does Peter like maintain that he isn't Spider-Man while also being Spider-Man and doing these heroic things where everybody's going to try and get him to pull his mask off or something like that. I think that'll be the big thing that happens with the next movie. But the thing is, it's nice to see that again. A big problem with Marvel films is that a lot of the movies don't result in some kind of consequence that affects future films in some capacity. This movie does a very good job at having a really good film and then the credits keeping you interested in what's going to happen in the Marvel universe going forward, and what happens to Spider-Man going forward. Because I can even imagine like in a future film, like somebody mentions like, oh yeah, did you see what happened to Spider-Man? His identity got revealed, and it's like, oh well, I guess we'll have to figure that out later, and we better fight this bad guy. Like it's just going to be this throwaway line until we get back to like Spider-Man, I don't know, 3.
Mm.
Hopefully it'll actually be good. The other thing that they showed is the post-credit scene showing that what is it? Samuel Jackson and Maria Hill were actually Skrulls the entire time.
Dun dun
What did you think
dun.
about that? What did you think about that?
So I think obviously this is a setup for the Skrull War type of invasion thing. I think like that's where kind of Captain Marvel kind of shoes in almost.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but I feel like if they kind of go with like what the comic kind of does, that means Shield will also be Sword, because Sword and Shield,
Sword. Mm-hmm.
and Sword's basically the space version of Shield, basically
Shield.
just taking care of all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think like yeah, definitely the future stuff is gonna go cosmic, 100%. Like obviously you got
You see,
Guardians, Eternals is very like it's not even just cosmic, it's just very godly and otherworldly almost. So I feel like maybe now finally they're moving away from Earth stuff, and especially when at some point they're going to introduce the Fantastic Four again. So very much I feel like they're going to focus on stuff with the Skrulls and the alien type of stuff, but very much I think in the future maybe they'll do like a Nova movie, because they kind of had the Nova Corps in like the first Guardians, but like I feel like that's where they're probably going to lean towards, and they're going to do a lot more cosmic stuff in the future.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's already been established that there's going to be two different Marvel focuses. There's going to be like the the terrestrial Marvel movies, which is like everything like based on Earth, and then there's going to be like the cosmic side of things, that's Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff, and then maybe like Samuel L. Jackson's character is going to be the bridge towards these two interacting in some capacity. We just don't know at this stage. Like, the ground people are going to be obviously Spider-Man, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, maybe to some capacity. And then maybe all the kind of spin-off shows. Oh yeah, you also have like what is it, Black Widow and stuff. But I think the main thing is I don't necessarily know if the Skrulls are going to be evil because they have set them up to be good. And so it
Yeah, but
very
what's
well
the
could
point of
be that.
hijacking someone like freaking Nick Fury and stuff like that? Like,
But they didn't. Yeah, but they didn't hijack him. That's what I'm saying. They're working for him.
hmm.
That's 100%, because the thing is like, yeah, because they okay, so they essentially show, okay, the two people are like I think like Talos, from they introduced him in Captain Marvel. Thank God that I watched that film, so I actually know who this guy
Let's
actually
be
is.
honest. When the end of Infinity War happened and then the phone fell down, I think like only a solid few amount of people knew who Captain that logo was.
Yeah. But like, it's good that I watched the movie so I know who this character is. But the thing is, him and Fury have like a good relationship, so they actually haven't captured him. I don't think that
There's no sense of betrayal
Fury.
here. They're not going to do
No,
that.
no, 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 no. But what I'm saying is like essentially the Skrulls work for Fury because Fury helped them in um like Fury helped them back in the 90s. My only problem is, okay, why didn't they help during Endgame?
Hmm. Yeah, like I think that's the main plot point. It's like a lot of this stuff would help if you just helped earlier.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. But the other thing is, somebody pointed out while I was reading online, like, Marvel was known, and especially like Nick Fury in particular, of using robots called life model decoys, which are essentially like these androids that look like identical to like a character, and essentially like what would happen
isn't
is
that
like,
how they explained Agent Coulson dying in the first Avengers movie? Where it's like,
I
oh,
don't
he was a
think.
life decoy. He's not real.
No, 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 no. I think he actually does die, and but they life model decoys are actually used in the Agents of Shield TV series. So I think that's the reason why they didn't use them for Nick Fury, because Nick Fury like dies all the time, like back in older comics. And it usually gets explained, oh, it's not really Nick Fury, it's actually a robot version of him, and he's actually okay, which is makes sense for like his character to always be cautious and not have his real version of himself like somewhere because of a potential assassination. So it makes sense, like, oh, he gets like these, so instead of life model decoys he has scrolls, um potentially, like, as these spy agents, especially given that he quote unquote disbanded Shield and gave it to Coulson, right?
Mm.
It very much like it could be seen as, oh, he left Shield so he could form Sword instead. So there's that. But then, like, I read Secret Invasion like a very long time ago. So it could very much be that it doesn't necessarily mean that the Skrulls can't be bad guys. I think they're going to do a better job at, like, well, at least not necessarily a better job, but like a new way to introduce
Yeah,
Skrulls.
there's going to
So
be a
if you
reason
think
why they
about it,
betray almost. Like, there has to be something that
because they
happens.
because I think from my understanding, Sarin actually has a daughter. Um, they kind of, or like they have a child or something. That's the whole point that happened in Captain Marvel. So it could be that like his daughter might not like the concept of uh you know all her people working for humans kind of thing, and that leads to there being like some kind of revolution, and that leads to there being like a secret invasion where she goes against the wishes of her parents, who obviously, like, are very thankful for Nick Fury and the humans for adopting him after the events of the Skrull Kree War.
Mm.
But she isn't. She's like the next generation. She might see like humans are a they're like kind of like slave masters, so to speak, to the Skrull people. So she tries to subvert it and get rid of him. And that leads to their kind of being like instead of doing like a repeat of the Hydra stuff. So they're kind of doing it in a different way. Because otherwise, yeah, the betrayal might happen. It just might not be like Talos isn't the bad guy. That's what I think will be the difference. Like, it'll be someone else within the Skrull ranks that'll be a bad guy. Because the only other thing you can really do with Skrulls at this stage is like, okay, they're there, they're agents, and yeah, maybe we'll fight the Kree with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does leave a lot of things open, and again, it does a good job at like getting you interested in the story going forward from Marvel. I don't know what the next film is, but yeah, like we'll just have to see. I think we'll have to wait till next year, right, for the next Marvel film.
Yeah, pretty much. I think they're pretty much done this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, as mentioned before, they've got Comic-Con coming up like next week, so they're gonna finally announce the rest of the dates because at this point, no one knows. Like this is the end, but obviously not really the end. But yeah, if anything else, yeah, overall, yeah, Far From Home is a pretty solid film in the franchise. I think it's probably on the upper echelon, but it's not like it's not something where I'm like, oh man, this is amazing, I'm gonna keep on watching it. I feel like there's so much stuff like once again something like what is it? Winter Soldier is still pretty much king.
Oh yeah. I mean,
yeah, so
yeah, Winter Soldier is definitely a more mature film, though. I
yeah,
think
well,
this
that's the thing.
film
This
is
one
like
has that happy, like it does have like moments where it's like very like teenage, kind of like Stranger Things almost at certain points where
but
it's like, oh man, we're talking about love and getting the girl. So I feel like yeah, that stuff is kind of cool to at least have, and at least have
although that
Peter
being
Parker
said,
doing
like
that type of stuff.
I will point out that I actually really liked, like, there's the scene where, like, he's fighting Quentin Beck, like, in London, and like Quentin Beck's pretending to be shot. But then like Spider-Man, like it's this really excellent scene where it's like Spider-Man almost like lets his guard down, and but he manages to like stop Quentin's gun from shooting him at the back of the head, because that's where Quentin was actually at, and he was trying to trick Spider-Man by shooting him in the back of the head, but like his Spidey sense like came in. I really liked how it kind of showed that, like, yeah, he was like doing trying to manipulate Peter the entire time to get a jump on him. But luckily, because of Peter Tingle, he was able to detect it. But it was a really like subtle scene that does actually kind of up the ante in terms of the acting. I thought this was like a fantastic film, like easily like I personally think it's one of the better films coming out of Marvel because of the events, because of the previous ones. I'd probably put it up like 8 or 9 easily. Yeah, I think I don't know if I like this film more than Homecoming. I think I probably do.
I
But
have,
at
I
the
have to
same time,
rewatch it, but it all depends. Like,
yeah, same.
because like everyone's acting is kind of the same. Like as mentioned before, I don't really like. I guess like Tom Holland, like he's okay in being like a kind of a weird, awkward teenager almost, and like everyone kind of does their job. I feel like it really does come down to the villains. And like Michael Keaton as
I mean, I was gonna
Michael
say,
Keaton's pretty good, but Jake Gyllenhaal is also really good. Like they're both
yeah.
solid actors in how
Well, I
they
mean,
they portray themselves.
well, I mean, Spider-Man generally has an excellent cast of villains, and they've hired really great actors to play those villains. So definitely, I think there is a bigger potential to have them kind of do like a Sinister Six movie, and get these characters back, in a big Spider-Man film to fight Spider-Man in. If they keep getting this kind of like level of actors to come in. Okay, so Tom Holland, I think, is probably the best iteration of live action Spider-Man we've had. Do you think Toby is better? Is that the reason why?
Well,
Like, I don't know.
that's the thing. I think he does a good job, but I for some reason I don't know. I don't really like his acting, but like obviously the material that they give him is good in the sense of him being a teenager, because like obviously the problem with Tobey Maguire, he very much has the scientist type of field stuff down, but you never really believed him as a kid.
He does a nerd.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's very nerdy. Andrew Garfield is very like the cool nerd, but like,
Nah,
but
no,
at the same time,
Andrew
he's like a
Garfield.
teenager,
No, Andrew Garfield is a horrible Peter Parker. He's literally, the first introduction of him is him literally being a bully, and we're supposed to feel sorry for him. No, fuck off. Andrew Garfield was a horrible Spider-Man. Actually, no, I'll take that back. The thing is, Tobey Maguire did an excellent job as Peter Parker, and he did like an okay job at Spider-Man. But again, like, you can kind of give him a pass because it's like, it's the first Spider-Man film. Their writing for it wasn't them making a quippy Spider-Man who kind of throws out a lot of insults as he fights to throw off like the characters. Andrew Garfield is a horrible Peter Parker. He doesn't look like a nerd. He's far too attractive to look like a nerd, by the way. And he doesn't act like a nerd throughout the film, but he somehow is bullied and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I mentioned, he's the cool nerd. It's like, oh, what's your nerdy thing? I like photography.
No, he's not,
like,
but not even cool nerd. He wasn't like, the reason why he was being bullied throughout the films didn't really make sense. Like, yeah, it's like they didn't like him, but it's like, oh, like, but he was well liked. He gets a girlfriend. All these people like him. Like, it doesn't make sense that he, like, whereas like Tobey Maguire's character, he's like a social outcast. And the same thing with even Tom Holland's character. Like, his only close friend is I forget the character's name. The chubby Asian dude, right? Like, he has him as his friend, and that's it. Otherwise, he's pretty much a social outcast. But Tom Holland's character also is smart, and he's a bit of a nerd, and he can like create things, much like Tony Stark Maguire's character. Yeah, well, yeah, and Tony Stark. Yeah, and it's supposed to be like a reference, because again, like, people keep forgetting that, like, Peter Parker is supposed to be a smart guy. He actually creates the the web shooters, right?
Which I guess you don't really see much of it in this movie. I feel like this movie works at a very...
You saw it last movie.
Yeah,
that's
the
reason. But
yeah, that's the thing. I feel like this movie works at a very brisk pace, so you don't really see much of him being like an inventor or like working things on the fly. Like, it would have been cool, or very interesting, if he did something with the broken drone or something like that. But
we do get to see him be a creative. You had when Happy picks him up and he designs his suit, and they play like the original. I forget what song it is.
What, AC/DC Back in Black? Don't worry, I'm a fan. Yeah.
So they play that, and that's obviously supposed to be a reference to, oh yeah, he is like the next. He's supposed to have the spirit of Tony Stark in him, and that shows his inventive side. Like, you already see his inventive side in Homecoming, when he creates the web fluids and stuff. Although I'm not a big fan of the concept of Spider-Man needing to make web fluid. I'm very much in the camp that prefers the organic webbing, which they did technically retcon Spider-Man having that, but then they retconned it out as well. So
because comic book problems.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things. It's like, it's always done in a way that, oh, he's run out of web fluid, and that's the reason why he can't use his web. So it's like, it's always played out to be, okay, yeah, he has unlimited web fluid until the plot demands it. Okay, why not just give him organic web fluid and just say he can't produce anymore?
But it removes the tension, don't you see?
Well, Stan Lee actually mentioned that, back when he created the character, like, it totally, like, the whole idea of like Peter Parker making his web fluid, like, didn't come to mind. It's like, he even said, like, if I had have thought that, I would have put that in as the character's like origin, right? But to him, and because of the time, like, they didn't have the idea of like genetic modification like going that far, like, it wasn't a thing. So yeah, we don't really we don't really see him being an inventor the entire time, but I think part of that reason is we already saw him be that in Homecoming, and maybe we'll get to see him do that in I don't know, whatever
the future is, which apparently
all we can hope is that it's a better Spider-Man 3 than the previous Spider-Man 3, and it will get a sequel, unlike the Amazing Spider-Man movie series. So
ooh, yeah, Spider-Man's always had some trouble. But yeah, that's basically be us for this week. You can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and we stream it every single week on our YouTube channel, Marketing Movies, under Pancake Parlay. So until next time, Henry Cavill could be the next villain in the next Spider-Man. Who knows? But until next time, see you guys.
Gotcha.